I never thought this day would come. Walking into our office late at night, I found Susy, my wife, frantically shredding documents. Schmidt, her supposed ally, stood nearby, smirking. The photos of me with Heidi, my assistant, were plastered on the walls, but I knew they were fake. Susy believed them without question, her anger and betrayal palpable. My career, my marriage, everything was unraveling. As I watched, Schmidt whispered something to Susy, and they both laughed. A sinister, plotting laugh. I realized this wasn't just infidelity. It was a meticulously planned takedown. My heart pounded. I had to fight back or lose everything. I can't take the cold anymore. I step out onto the balcony of my hotel room, holding a bottle of water from the small fridge. After feeling a bit better from my shower, I finally have time to think. Where did my plane land 2 days ago, I wonder? As I reflect on the last 2 days, a few things stand out. One thing is clear. I have no clue what's going on. This confusion continued yesterday morning when 2 police officers showed up right after I talked to the doctor. They asked me some questions, and for a moment, I almost told the truth and named names, but then my cautious side told me to stay quiet. Susy is quick to act, almost too quick sometimes. She makes decisions fast, and that helps her in a tense courtroom. She usually knows what to do and finds the truth. I'm different. I like to think things through carefully. While Susy rushes into the fight, I prefer to be careful and sneaky. I think again about the police. Talking to them was probably not a smart move. I don't want rumors about what happened on Friday night to spread. Not unless that jerk Schmidt is behind it. It's already tough what they said about me at the hospital, but they could only guess what really happened. They might think Susy was involved too. I really don't want anyone knowing about that. If I were to tell the police everything, I would lose all control. I sigh heavily, thinking that Susy might be caught up in this because of Schmidt. I suspect there was some pressure involved. I hope Susy was under a lot of stress, but I've seen her fierce side before, and I've never seen her that angry on Friday night. She was so mad that she didn't even seem like herself. There's definitely more to this than the rumors about me. Schmidt is the real problem here. But what if Susy isn't just a victim like me? What if she's mixed up in all this mess? If that's true, then I can't see a way out. If she is involved, then refusing to talk to the police feels even more right. Her connections to the police as an Ada could make everything worse. I think back to my time with the police while I was in the hospital. At first it felt like a friendly chat, but it quickly turned tense because my answers were unclear. I'm sure they didn't believe me when I said I couldn't remember anything from when I got into the car at the airport until I woke up in the hospital. But the last question they asked made me nervous. I wanted to know who they would contact to tell me what was really going on. I suddenly felt alone. I wanted to talk to someone. Being an only child, my only option was to call my parents tonight. That was hard for me. I haven't been close to my father for more years than I want to count. The only good relationship I had was with my mother, but that seems to have changed too. I would have liked to connect with Susy, but now that feels unlikely. Susy is also an only child. I know from our talks that her dad left when she was a teenager, and she doesn't talk to her mom at all. The only time I met her mother was at our wedding. On top of that, I started to realize that I don't know who my friends really are. Susy had already told my parents her side of the story. Who else has she shared it with? I have so many questions right now, and not many answers. Monday, 7:57 a.m. Jake, I don't know how to say this, Tom says as he closes my office door. I lean back in my chair and look at Tom Weston, the managing partner of the firm and a longtime friend. I wave my hand, inviting Tom to sit down. Sadly, we don't have time, Tom replies, hardly looking at me. You shouldn't even be in here. At least tell me what's going on, I say. Considering what happened in the last few days, I have an idea. Just yesterday, there was an emergency meeting about some serious claims regarding your behavior. They scheduled a formal interview with the HR officer for 8 a.m. today. I stand up in shock. Wait, you had a meeting on Sunday? Jake, this is serious, Tom says. HR called the meeting. Because of your high position here, I'm here as both your friend and partner. You're in big trouble, Jake. You need to make some tough choices quickly. Where's the meeting? I mumble, standing up. Jake, I'm warning you as your friend, don't lose it. The meeting is in the executive conference room. Tom leaves my office and heads toward the room. I look at the clock. It's 8 a.m. and Heidi isn't at her desk. If there's one thing Heidi is good at, it's being on time. I thought she would be off today, but I still need to talk to her. Who will be at the meeting? I ask. Me and Hinkley, of course. I had to make Evans your deputy. Lansky and Schmidt are the other two. Schmidt? I shout. Tom flinches, glances at me, then looks away. I know you don't like him, but this is how it goes. You helped create the HR review process, he adds. I don't want to be here any more than you do. I know this place really well. I remind myself to take a quick look around. There are 5 people here who are in charge. 3 of them are strong in their beliefs. The first is Tom, the main partner here. The second is Hinkley, who manages human resources. The third is the lawyer, who was me until this morning. The last 2 people here change depending on the situation. One is chosen by the human resources manager, and the other is picked by the main partner. I guess you've picked Lansky, but I won't say anything about that, so we can still be friends. Just then, Tom stops me with his hand. He tells me, I shouldn't say this, but I can't let you go in there without a heads up. They are going to offer you a severance package if you choose to leave. He explains that everyone decided the best way to handle things was to avoid lawsuits and unwanted attention. The easiest way to do this was for me to resign. There was nothing I could do to fight this, Jake. I could only make the severance offers as good as I could. I lean back against the wall. I feel numb. I can't believe this is happening. How did things get so bad so fast, I wonder? Jake, are you okay? Tom asks. No, I'm not okay, Tom. I need a few minutes. He tells me I have to stay alert. I know that, Tom. Just give me a minute to collect myself. I realize I sound more upset than I wanted. I look at Tom and he smiles. When this is all over, I hope we can still be good friends. Don't worry, Tom. Okay, let's go. Tom takes me around the corner and stops in front of the meeting room door. He looks at me one last time before opening it. I walk in behind Tom and see 4 people sitting across from me at the long table. Tom sits at the head of the table, leaving the chairs across from me empty. I take the middle chair facing Christy. When our eyes meet for a moment, she quickly looks down at her hands on the table. I really respect her. I hired her myself. I didn't even think about anyone from a different school. I wanted someone who understood Texas culture well. I helped her develop in her role, but she didn't need much help. I know her as a great coworker, but now she is sitting there as my strong competitor. Mr. Vickers, Hinkley says to start the meeting, you are here for a meeting about company rules. Yesterday we talked to each other about some serious claims of bad behavior. These claims break company rules. Such behavior can lead to being let go. I interrupt him. I don't feel sorry, but I need him to stop talking. I point directly at Schmidt. I sat next to Miss Hinkley. Mr. Vickers, you can't change who is in this group, she said. You're right, I can't help with that. But I have a problem because there is bad blood between Schmidt and me. Everyone here knows it. If things get worse, it could lead to a wrongful termination case. I felt tension in the room after I mentioned the lawsuit. I looked at each person on the panel, except for Schmidt. Miss Hinkley asked, Does anyone think Mr. Schmidt can be fair? I glanced at Christy. She seemed calm as she stared at me. This time, she didn't look away, and I finally turned my gaze elsewhere. She knows, just like I do, that Schmidt can't be fair. I couldn't read her face at all. If no one thinks Mr. Schmidt will be unfair, then you're wrong, I said, glaring at Schmidt. We already know you had nothing to do with forming this group. Great, I responded. You might be planning my end right now, but you've just dug another hole for your own problems. Another hole? Asked Lansky, confused. I looked at Arthur Lansky. I didn't understand why Tom picked him for this panel. As far as I knew, he only did inspections and wasn't involved in anything important. Don't encourage him, Hinkley warned. Lansky pushed. What do you mean by another hole? What were the first ones? I turned to Christy. Did you hold a meeting yesterday? Yes, she replied. I then looked at Lansky. There. You made the first mistakes yesterday when you interviewed the others without me. I have the right to see the evidence. I have the right to challenge those accusing me. You took away those rights, Jake. You know that this is a company. The Bill of Rights doesn't apply here. This isn't a criminal case, Christy interrupted. But I still have rights in the contract we signed. And that contract says I can be at the meeting. I have the right to hear what I'm accused of and to answer both in person and in writing. The process for picking candidates for top jobs in HR doesn't say that being at an interview is a must. She disagrees. Isn't it hard to have an interview if the person isn't there? Also, I have the right to see any claims and reply to them. I am both a boss and an employee. I believe both rules should be used here. If you look at the rules, they do not contradict each other. I know this for sure. It will be interesting to see what a civil court thinks about it. Jake, Tom jumped in. All this talk about courts and lawsuits makes me nervous. The goal of this meeting is to offer you a severance package. It's a really good offer given the situation. If I may say so. Am I fired? I asked Tom straight. Tom glanced at Christy and I saw her shake her head. No, he said. Let's see the offer, I answered. Hinkley handed me a briefcase across the table. I looked at the briefcase and then took it with both hands. I will think about it and let you know by the end of the week. The panel members suddenly looked at each other. We want you to think about this severance package and decide now. I felt shocked. Tom had warned me to be careful and told me I would have to make quick choices. Wait a moment, I said, trying to buy some time. You want me to think about this offer now and decide right away? Yes, Hinkley responded. I can't do that, I said simply. Then we will take back the severance offer. She said, hold on. Tom spoke again. Jake, I know this feels crazy, but what if you go back to your office, think about the offer, and then meet with us at noon to let us know your choice? Mr. Weston, Hinkley interrupted. That's not what we talked about yesterday. Tom's serious look made Hinkley quiet down. Tom, I said, I appreciate the extra time, but I need more than that. How much time do you need, Jake? I told you at least until the end of the week. We can't offer you that much time. Hinkley started. Tom, I haven't had the chance to look at those numbers. I also haven't reviewed the claims made against me. I haven't had time to prepare a response. You haven't seen the affidavits or the photographs? Christy suddenly shouted. I turned to look at her. I only learned about them on Friday night, I said, holding back the urge to look at Schmidt. I keep hearing about these papers, but nobody has given me a copy. And I want to remind this group that there have been no formal charges against me yet. That's the plan, Jake, Christy said, stating the obvious. My plan is not to avoid this. Do you have those documents? Christy looked at Tom and then back at me. We have the original statement, but we only have copies of the photos. I need copies of both. Actually, I need the originals of what you have. You can copy them if you want. Jake, we won't hand over the original statements. For privacy reasons, we also won't share the photos. If we need a formal meeting with the head of HR on Wednesday, we will show you the documents then. Just leave the photos. I know they are fake anyway, but I really need the original statement. Jake, we can't do that. Christy says, if I don't get to see the original to prove it's not a fake, you will make my wrongful termination claim stronger. I really need that original, and I need time, at least until the end of the week. I stress. I'm sure you already have many copies of all the documents, and if the statement is real, what should I do? Throw it away. You could just reprint the statement and sign it again. Jake, can you give us a minute to talk about this? Christy asks. Sure, I say, slowly getting up from my chair, and I'm sure Schmidt noticed me. And Miss Evans, I add. Christy tilts her head like she always does when she wants to understand the point I'm making. Trust your judgment and experience, I say as I turn and walk out of the room, leaving my exit slip on the table. I close the door and lean against it. I can hear voices talking and arguing. Hinkley and Schmidt are clearly on the same side. Schmidt is clearly against me, but I've never had a problem with Hinkley before. Why is she blocking me now? Tom is on my side, and Lansky seems to agree with him. They say that the extra week won't hurt, and it might even help avoid more legal trouble with the wrongful termination case. Hinkley and Schmidt argue that the company could be sued at any time, and failing to act quickly might show that the company supports this behavior. They argue that so far, the company has followed the rules, and there's no reason not to keep going. They also completely refuse to give me any documents, even copies. They say I can get the documents during the official review by management. I can hear both sides talking loudly over each other. I realize that Tom's choice of Lansky is good for me. The only voice I didn't hear was Christy's. For the next minute, I only hear the soft sound of Christy's voice. I smile to myself. She really knows what she's doing. I hear quiet and then footsteps. I move away from the door so I won't fall. When Tom opens the door and invites me in, I close the door behind me and walk to the table. Christy seems to have taken charge as she gestures for me to sit down. I smile and explain that I'd rather stand. I don't want to say why. Jake, we have an offer for you. I need at least until the end of the week if you will listen to me. I nod. We ask that you take your severance package with you and think about it carefully. Please come back on Wednesday at noon and let us know what you decide. Right now, you are not fired. We have not started a formal review with Human Resources. Depending on your choice on Wednesday, we might start that process. For now, we will put you on administrative leave unless we ask you to come in. You cannot be on company property or access any documents, whether they are paper or electronic, except we will give you the original affidavit. You will not get any photographs. We expect those to be returned. If needed, you can see a copy of the pictures on Wednesday. Christy looks at me, waiting for my reaction. I smile and feel good inside. That is very close to what I do. Without giving up any rights I have according to company rules, I agree to your proposal. I assume someone can take me to my office so I can grab a few personal things I'll need for the next few days. Hinkley starts to say something, but Christy quickly says that's fine. She looks at Tom and he nods. Mr. Weston will be your escort. The meeting is clearly over and I pick up the package. I glance at Christy and wink. She doesn't respond, but I notice a small smile at the corner of her mouth. Still, that little smile can't hide her teary eyes. I leave the room first and step to the side. I watch as they all quietly leave and go about their work. Tom is the last to go. He looks at me with a sigh. You warned me, I say, putting my hand on his shoulder as we walk back to my office. Monday, 9:31 a.m. Mr. Vickers, would you mind following me? I let out a heavy sigh and stand up. I follow the receptionist through the double doors labeled Sutter, Klein, and Gambino. Susy sent me a text right before she walked into my office this morning, telling me that the meeting would be at our family lawyer's office. Usually, meeting with a lawyer is a sign of trouble, but Vicky has been friends with both Susy and me for years. I smile at her, even though I want to be angry. The few people I've already met don't pay attention as I walk past their desks back to Susy and Vicky's office, but I can feel their stares and hear whispers behind me. The receptionist shows me to the frosted glass door of the conference room. I open the door and walk in, seeing Vicky sitting next to Susy on the other end of the table. There are 2 empty chairs close to the door. Have a seat, Jake, says Vicky Gambino. I move the padded chair away from the desk and sit down slowly, maybe a little slower than I need to. Is your lawyer nearby? She asks. I look at her in confusion and then glance at my wife, who quickly lowers her eyes. Well, Vicky, first of all, it's good to see you. Second, why do I need a lawyer? Vicky turns away and leans a little closer to me. In a quiet voice, she asks, Jake, you're not planning to speak for yourself, are you? Do I need a lawyer? Susy called me last night to ask me to come so we could talk. At first, she wanted to meet at her office, but I reminded her about the court order. I wasn't going to break it. This morning, she texted me that we would meet at our family lawyer's office, which I thought was a good idea. Even though I've been hurt and betrayed recently, I'm hoping we can figure something out. But now I'm starting to think maybe I've been too hopeful. Vicky looks over at Susy. You didn't tell him anything, did you? Susy replies flatly. I asked him to come here at 9:30 so we could talk. It's not my fault if he jumped to conclusions. You didn't tell him that? Vicky stops, looking upset. After a moment, she says, I think we should reschedule. No, we should continue, says Susy. I want to finish this. The meeting's purpose is clear now. As my mom used to say, I'm no fool. I've had enough of the mess I've been through lately, and I won't take any more. If this is the end for me, I'll leave feeling ashamed. And just to let you know, Susy, I feel a lot better today than I did on Friday. Susy turns pale. Jake, Mr. Vickers, if we are going to keep having this meeting, you need to stop talking to Miss Vickers. Please talk to me instead. Nothing personal, ma'am. But just listen. After what Susy did to me on Friday night, she should be grateful I'm not taking legal action. In fact, it's still possible. Vicky looks shocked at my words, then turns to Susy. What happened Friday night? She asks. I look at both of them and laugh. You didn't tell her? I say to Susy. You haven't explained why you called this meeting. You didn't tell your own lawyer the truth, and now you're keeping important things from her too? What happened doesn't relate to our divorce, I say, leaning back in my chair when I finally say the word divorce. You think things like unlawful restraint and assault won't matter in court? I ask. What else haven't you told me? Vicky presses Susy. I'll tell you later, Susy replies with annoyance. Let's just finish this. Vicky looks at Susy and then back at me. Mr. Vickers, it seems you now understand why we are meeting. She pauses and glances at Susy again. Susy has spread out a pile of papers on the table. At the top is a divorce suit that was filed just after 9 o'clock this morning. I can only stare at it, not wanting to touch it. Then I look back at Susy. I can't believe you're doing this. I let out a small sob. Wow. I'm staring at the papers. The ink still looks wet. You said, Jake, I can't be with you after what you did to me. What you put me through. What I did to you. Are you joking? Susy doesn't say a word. She looks like she wants to be anywhere but here. I didn't do it, Susy. She tilts her head back and looks at me. I'm so tired of hearing this, Jake. How can you keep lying? Because I'm not lying. Jake, we have proof. Then it's fake, because it never happened. And why do I keep hearing about all this proof, but no one shows it to me? Susy just stares at me, then grabs a folder from the pile of papers in front of Vicky. She throws the folder on the table. Here's your proof. I look at her for a moment, then focus on the folder. I take it and slowly open it. On top is a 2-page legal document. I glance through the first page, which says that I forced my assistant, Heidi Beavis, to do something. The second page has just one paragraph saying, I need to get better at organizing to be a better manager. It also has Heidi's signature, and it's been officially stamped. I look closely at Heidi's signature and have to admit it looks like hers, as well as her initials on both pages. I set aside the document and find myself staring at 8 shiny photos of Heidi and me in a motel room. I gasp in shock. I can see why someone might jump to the wrong idea, but surely anyone who knows me or Heidi would know we would never do that. I look up at Susy, her eyes piercing into me. I don't know what to say. Finally, I manage to say, I can't believe you were foolish enough to take pictures. I didn't take any pictures. Well, you're still foolish. I can't believe you cheated on me. I can't believe you treated that poor woman like that. I look at her. Want to know why you can't believe it? You can't believe it because deep down you know it's not true. Jake, please don't waste my time. Look at the pictures. I can't explain it, but I didn't do it. Give me some time, please. Don't rush me. If you don't believe me, think about Heidi. And don't think I didn't see the look in your eyes Friday night when I said Heidi's name. Did you really think she would do that? You think I'd let you take those photos? I've had enough of this, Jake. I know better than anyone how good you are at making up stories. I'm tired of your tricks. I'm tired of your lies. I'm tired of our life together. I don't want to spend another minute with you, Vicky says firmly. I look at her, not trying to wipe away the tears rolling down my face. When you read the papers, you'll see that the agreement is fair. Since we don't have any kids, we don't need to worry about paying child support. Miss Vickers has decided not to stay in touch with you after the divorce, so she won't ask for alimony. The agreement just says that everything you both own will be split equally. The agreement will also include your severance pay from the firm. You both need to take a few things into account. I hope you can agree on everything quickly so we can finalize the divorce. I glance at Vicky and feel a bit sorry for her. She's in a tough spot. How can you be a lawyer and also a friend to a couple and then end up picking sides? I bite my lip and fold my arms for a moment, staring at the table. I didn't do anything wrong. Those photos must be fake, and the documents are probably fake too. Heidi would never sign something like that, no matter what. Where did you get those? Who gave them to you? Susy. I look at her for help, hoping she'll back me up. She quickly looks away. I understand now. You got them from Schmidt, right? She stays quiet. When? When did he give you those papers? Susy takes a breath and finally answers, Thursday afternoon. She says he came to my office and showed them to me. Wow, you didn't waste any time. So Schmidt came and shared all this with you. And you believed him. You know we were both trying for the same job, and I was the one who got it. His only chance to win is if he makes me look bad or gets me kicked out. Do you really trust those papers he gave you? Have I given you a reason not to trust me? Don't you feel even a little uncertain? Susy looks at me for a long time before saying, "No, Jake, I don't feel uncertain." Tim didn't show me the forged copies. She gestures at the photos on the table. "I made the copies for you." "No, Tim didn't show me anything. He showed me the negatives. I even got someone to check them at the crime lab. The negatives weren't messed with at all. They are real." I sit there shocked. "How can that be true? I want to see the negatives." "Why, Jake? I've looked at them closely already. Now you doubt me." After what happened Friday night, I still have doubts. But I'm not questioning you. It's the negatives I want to check. You wouldn't mind if I asked my expert to look at them, right? My marriage, my job, my life are on the line here, Susy. You understand that. How can I be sure you won't ruin them? Why would I do that if I need them to prove I'm innocent? And what if they don't help you? They will. But let's say they don't. What's wrong with giving me a chance? Susy looks at me for a moment, then reaches over to the pile of papers and picks up a few from the top. I watch as she goes through the papers until she finds a big envelope. She peeks inside, looks at me, and then throws the envelope across the table. I hope it comes back without a scratch. Maybe this will finally make you admit you did something wrong. Better yet, why not give them back to Tim? She says coldly. It's nice that you know each other's names. I look back at her. Schmidt is clearly part of the plan, but the way you act around him makes me doubt your side of things. You jerk, she yells. I'm not the one who cheated. What I did with Schmidt was for revenge. You fool! And who said I was with Schmidt, who is just an almost ex-husband trying to ruin a loyal wife? And what about Friday night when you caught me off guard? I saw the very thing you accused me of in this divorce paper. No, you were at home Friday night after your plane landed, but I wasn't there. I spent that night at a friend's house, and she'll say that if she needs to. I don't know where Schmidt was, but I guess he can confirm where he was too. I heard you were in the hospital. I hope nothing serious. You must be joking. I sighed. I use all my legal skills to stay calm, but just as I'm about to reply, something Vicky said earlier comes to mind. I turn to Vicky and ask, how do you know about the severance package? I look back at Susy. That offer was only made at 8 o'clock this morning in a private meeting. There's no way you should know about it. I hope you're not planning to hide Mr. Vickers's money, says Vicky. That's not the main issue, and you know it, Vicky. I look at Susy again. How did you get this secret information? Susy just smiles. She keeps her gaze on me and smiles. Tell me, damn it, I demand. What is it that you're hiding? She looks back at me. I'm not hiding anything, except that I've loved you for the past 6 years. You know exactly how I found out. I got my details from the same person who took those pictures. I lean back in my chair and let out a sigh. She says it with such confidence, even if I can prove this whole thing is a lie. I can't help but wonder if there's still hope for us. I turn to Vicky. Please remember what your client just said, Vicky. Someday, I might need her to say it again under oath. And if she won't, I will ask you to come forward. Jake, you know you can't make her testify because of attorney-client privilege. I bet that privilege wouldn't hold if we challenge it. She won't testify about you or any accusations. She will only talk about where she got her information. I think we're done here, Vicky says suddenly. No, we're not done. I have 3 things to talk about. First, if the divorce happens, we can't split our money fairly. For example, the house is only in my name. I owned it before we got married, so it doesn't count as part of our shared belongings in this state. But your cheating changes things, Mr. Vickers, Vicky says calmly. We have proof of your part in it. Even if I had cheated, I don't think it would matter much. Plus, if Susy cheated too, it would make things even, wouldn't it? You would have to show proof of that, and you don't have any, Susy says with a smirk. You idiot! I catch myself before I yell. I take a deep breath. Have you ever thought about the man you chose? Schmidt has wanted to be with you for a long time. Now that he has, do you really think he will stay quiet about it? Jesus, Susy. I bet at least 24 people knew what happened that Friday night. I respond sadly. Schmidt is not a good man. Don't you see he set this all up to hurt me? You're just part of his plan. I stare at her, shocked she doesn't realize how Schmidt tricked her. Anyway, I continue. Second, when I see these photos, do you know someone had to take them? Who do you think that was? It was done with a tripod and a remote control, Jake. What else do you want to talk about? Third, you cut me off from everything. Credit cards, my car, my clothes, the house, everything. You left me with nothing but some old clothes. We can argue over bank accounts for days, but I need my car, my clothes, and my personal things. And I need them right now. Or do I have to go to court? You know, I have some friends who are judges too. Susy frowns and looks at Vicky, who seems upset again. Susy reaches for her purse. She pulls out a set of car keys and throws them to me. I recognize them right away. The D37 spot is in the garage across the street. She says, "In the car, you will find your toiletries and clothes. You can talk to my lawyer to set up a time to get your things from the house with a witness there. You said there were only 3 things. What else is there?" I look at her and wonder if she has always been this cold. Was she always seeking revenge? I never thought I would end up on her bad side. I just want to know why you want the divorce and why you won't even talk to me about it. She points to the table. "You're thinking about your reasons. So affidavits and pictures are your reasons for divorcing me?" "Yes, we have had our problems, but I believe we could work through them. I can't stay with a man who lies to me. If I can show you that I'm telling the truth, will you drop the divorce? Then we can talk about getting back together. Jake, just stop. You need to accept that you made a mistake and we can both move on." I stand up and walk toward the door. Anger is rising in me. I turn back, hand on the doorknob. "I didn't make a mistake, Susy. Maybe I just loved you too much. I didn't sleep with Heidi. I can't explain the pictures or why Heidi signed that paper, but I will figure it out. I will fight this divorce. You can count on it." I open the door and close it carefully behind me. I walk quickly down the hallway back to the reception area. Everyone is staring at me. I mumble to myself, why not just take a picture? It feels like everyone has already done that. Chapter 4. Darkest Before Dawn. Monday, 10:46 a.m. After some searching and using my car remote, I find my car in the parking lot. I'm not surprised to see trash bags in the back seat and trunk. They're full of clothes, even my suits. As I drive out of the garage, I'm still shocked by everything that has happened so fast. I can't believe she tossed everything without at least talking to me. The pictures look bad, and I can't believe Heidi signed that document. There must be more to this, and I need to talk to Heidi soon to figure it out. But what do I do now? The plan I made last night fell apart after a big problem at work. If my dad hadn't told me about Green, I wouldn't know what to do. I'm confused and don't really know what I feel or want. I keep thinking this is all a big mistake. I'm still flying home on Friday afternoon, and it feels like a nightmare that I can't wake up from. But I know it's not a dream. I can't control my feelings. One minute I'm angry, and the next I'm sad and thinking about how to fix my marriage. Oddly enough, I wasn't too upset about Susy filing for divorce. I knew I had to prove to her that I didn't do anything wrong. I just didn't expect to have to do it while dealing with a divorce. Now I wonder if it's worth it since she's claiming we can't stay together. I could have just walked away from our marriage after what she did to me on Friday night. But her claim of cheating made me really mad. Sigh. As tough as things have been lately, I do have a couple of things starting to go in a better direction. I spent almost all my leftover money to get my car out of the parking lot by Gambino's office. Fortunately, the gas tank is half full. My first stop is the Western Union office, where I collect the $10,000 my father sent me. I already picked up my new card at the American Express office when I left my old job. Then I opened a new bank account in my name and put $9,000 into it. The last $1,000 is safely in my wallet. Now I really need help, and the first step is to follow my dad's advice. After driving for 20 minutes, I leave downtown Dallas and reach a smaller business area near Love Field Airport. I park next to a building that has a sign on the door that says Bud Green Investigations. Bud is an old friend of my dad's. He used to work for my dad, taking care of security for his company. When my dad retired 7 years ago, just before Susy and I got married, he helped Bud start his own investigation company. As the lawyer for my own business, I sometimes needed an investigator. I turned to Bud from the start, and he never let me down. He has built a small but effective team of investigators. They are quick, trustworthy, discreet, and accurate. Everything a lawyer needs. Do I need much right now? I wonder as I hear my phone ring. Sitting in my car and looking at the door of Bud's office, I think about everything that has happened this morning. I realize that Vicky was right. and I need to start another process. 5 minutes later, I hang up and call a new number, Bud Green Investigations. I introduce myself to Tracy. Hi, Tracy, this is Jake. Do you know if Bud is in this morning? Oh, hi, Jake. Yes, he's in the office. I think he's back at the coffee shop flirting with Yolanda. Hold on, I'll see if he's free. A little later, I hear Bud's voice. Jake, what's up? Hey, Bud. Honestly, I'm better now. How's Yolanda's coffee? I can tell Tracy is telling stories again. Well, if you can't flirt with your wife in a coffee shop, who can you flirt with? Bud laughs. Bud, I really need your help, I finally say. Sure, what do you need? You know we're always ready to help. Is it something big? This is personal and very important. I don't like the sound of that, Jake. How can I help? Well, first, I want to be at the top of your list and show you something. You're always at the top of my list, Jake. I really appreciate it. When can we meet? I think it should be soon. Okay, let's get to work and see what's going on. Can you meet now? Sure. Do you want to meet at your office or somewhere else? I can meet at your office. Great. When? How about now? I'm in the parking lot. I look out the car window at Bud's office and see the blinds moving. I wave at him. What's up? I hear Bud laugh. Come over here. I'll be right there. A few minutes later, I'm sitting in front of his desk, ready to explain everything that's been going on. I tell Bud about seeing Susy on Friday night and what happened that evening, but I keep it short, just like he wants. I mention that she took all the money from our bank account and canceled my credit cards. I fill him in on what happened at my job this morning, and I finally explain the meeting with Susy and our lawyer. I watch him as I talk. He looks like he really wants to hear every word. He's not judging me. When I finish, we both lean back in our chairs. What do you have for me? I take out 3 folders I got from Susy earlier. I look through them until I find the affidavit and show it to him. This should be the original. Can we check if it's real? Bud looks it over quickly, making a whistling sound. Wow, this doesn't make you look good at all. He takes off the paperclip holding the 2 sheets together and holds them up to the window with tweezers. At first glance, Jake, it looks real, but there can be a lot hidden in the details. I'll have my best guy look into it. Good. I still have 1 copy left, and I hope to talk to Heidi later today. Are you sure that's a good idea? No, but I have to do it. I can't believe she really signed that affidavit. Bud looks at me for a moment. Man, Jake, I didn't think any of that was true. But remember, it's not about what you think matters. It's about what you can prove, especially since you've already been found guilty. I nod in agreement. I hand him the 2nd folder, telling him it has the negatives from the photos. Then I open the 3rd folder, which has the glossies and a copy of the affidavit Susy first gave me. I spread the 8 photos out on his desk. He quickly goes through each one and whistles again. Now I see why she's angry at you, boy. It's not my fault, I say, but I have to confess something. Bud looks at me, curious. I recognize the room in these pictures. It's my hotel room from a week and a half ago in Houston. He sighs. This doesn't look good, Jake. Was your secretary there too? Yes, I admit. He keeps looking at the photos and starts to study them more. I move to his side of the desk so I can see them better. Susy said one of the forensics experts looked at the negatives. Is there any way to know if they've been changed? It depends on how good the changes were. You can usually tell. He leans closer to one of the clearer pictures and uses a magnifying glass to look at it closely. After a moment, he leans back and grunts. I'll have them check the negatives, but from what I see, they look real. What's worse, Jake, the man in those pictures looks just like you. He even has the same birthmark on his neck. With a sigh, Jake says, Yeah, I noticed that too, but there's one thing I can tell you about those pictures. The other person asks, What's that? They were set up. Set up? How do you know that? First of all, I've met your secretary. Sorry, I mean your administrative assistant. She's not the type to have that kind of trouble, and she wouldn't let anyone take her picture in that way. Also, you're not foolish enough to let someone take your picture either. And look at the nightstand near the bed. Do you see the clock and the flip calendar? He points to a picture and says, Yeah, I see them. What about them? Well, notice that they face the camera instead of the bed. They should be turned toward the bed, or at least the table across the room. Besides, I've never seen a flip calendar like that in hotel rooms, and if I did, it would be on the desk. not on the nightstand where the camera can easily see it. Do you remember if the hotel had such a calendar? Now that you mention it, no, I don't remember. But I can't say for sure, I just don't recall seeing one. That's easy to check, he replies. Now, I have a couple of questions for you. The calendar says today is January 15th. Jake looks at it and says, that was a Sunday. When did you check out of the hotel? I checked out on the same day, he replies. Actually, I left that morning. I had to meet some clients in San Antonio, so I went to the airport in the afternoon. I spent the night at the Marriott downtown and met with clients Monday through Friday before I came home. And your secretary? When did she check out? She checked out on Sunday too, but I think she flew back to Dallas. Well, it's not good that she was in Houston at the same time as you, but it's good to know you checked out on Sunday. We can be sure now that the pictures were set up. How do you know that? The calendar was flipped to January 15th, the day you checked out. So if that's you in bed, it must have been Saturday night. By Sunday night, you were already in San Antonio, right? Yes, that's right, but I don't see where you're going with this. Who flips the calendar to the next day the night before? Okay, maybe one or two people do that, but most people turn the calendar in the morning. This calendar is already set to Sunday, while the clock shows it's 1:30 in the morning. Did you happen to flip the calendar to Sunday before going to bed Saturday night? Hey, I say. If I had turned the calendar, I would have remembered everything. You didn't turn it, Bud chuckles. Someone else did it for you. But let's not get too excited. Just because someone moved it doesn't mean we have all the answers. We still need to check a lot of things. Do you remember what time you went to bed on Saturday night? I think it was around midnight. We all got together in the hotel lobby to celebrate a business deal we closed earlier that day. Who was with you? My secretary was there, but she didn't join the celebration. She's pretty quiet and doesn't drink much. Where do you think she was? I guess she was in her room, but I don't know after 9 o'clock at night. Okay, so we can assume she went to her room alone? Otherwise, I'd be shocked. Who else was at the celebration? Weston, Schmidt, and me. Schmidt? Is he the guy who messed up your shorts? I laugh. Yeah, that's him. If you don't like him, why did you celebrate with him? It was more of a work thing. I've never liked him much, but he's a good vice president of sales. I have to admit, he helped get the deal done. And your party ended around midnight? I'm not sure when they left. I went upstairs first, around midnight. They were still drinking? Yeah. How many drinks did you have? Oh, I can't say for sure. Were you drunk when you went up? I wasn't stumbling, but I'd had enough to be over the legal limit to drive. Like Weston. He was very high. What about Schmidt? I don't think he was drunk. I remember him buying 2 drinks, one for himself, but he didn't take them when it was our turn. Bud thinks for a moment. What time did you wake up on Sunday? I remember waking up late. Yeah, it was around 9 in the morning. I was surprised I slept that long. I usually get up around 7 even if I go to bed late. Did you have a hangover? I don't really remember. I felt a little off. I couldn't see clearly. I went for a run around 9:30 and came back around 10 o'clock. I felt much better after that. I think I was sweating a bit. I had a slight headache, but mostly I just felt groggy. Okay, that's a good start. But I want to talk again later today. I need to know more about your Saturday and Sunday. I want a full schedule for both days and everyone who was with you. Wow. I'm not sure I can remember everything, especially about everyone else. Just remember, this is serious. Knowing where all the players are or where they should be will help solve this problem. I nod in agreement. All right, that sounds good. You know I won't be at the office. I have a few other important things to do. Will you call my cell phone when you are ready? Sure, but take your time. I have some papers to sign, and one of them is very important. I watch as he opens a drawer and takes out some papers. He shows them to me, except for one. He points to the one he's holding. You will give these to Tracy. Answer her questions and sign where she asks. That will make it official. He pauses and writes something on the form he still has. He holds the form out to me and asks me to fill in my name and address at the top. I do what he says and start to hand the form back to him. Just a minute, he says. I look at him, waiting for his next words. You need to sign at the bottom. This gives us permission to enter your home and listen in. Audio, video, and phones. We can't do anything with her cell phone. That would be illegal. But as a homeowner, you can put in security cameras. Well, that sounds good for a Friday night, but now it's already late, right? Yes, but from what you've told me, it may not be too late for tonight. Suddenly, I understand what he means. Of course, she wouldn't be with that jerk, right? He shrugs. Did you think it would be a fun Friday night? I shake my head and clench my teeth. I put the form on the table and sign at the bottom with a flourish. Oh, I say. We have a couple of small problems. First, I have a restraining order to stay away from the house. I can't let you in. Second, Susy took the key from me. The first issue is not a problem. There may be a court order against you, but there isn't one against me or my team. I wasn't going to ask you to come in anyway. Just let us do our job. Now, about the second thing. Do you have a spare key hidden? We can pick the lock if we need to, but I'd rather not unless we have to. Of course I do, I say, smacking my forehead. It's in the shed behind the house on the right side. There's a board nailed across 2 posts. It's not nailed tightly so you can pull it out. There's a key on the back of it. But that's not all. If you use the key and enter, you have 30 seconds to turn off the alarm. I can tell you the code I knew, but what if she changed it? We'll take our chances. She'll think you would never break the order, so she won't change the code. But let's be careful. Make sure you have the security company's number ready. My guy will be on the phone with you when he goes inside. If the code doesn't turn off the alarm, you need to call them right away and get the call off. I smile. That sounds like a good plan. Bud nods and offers me his hand. I shake it, feeling thankful. Have you found a lawyer yet? He asks. That's one of the things I still need to do. I called the parking lot before I drove over to set up an appointment. He nods. Just remember, every journey starts long before it really begins. I think we just took a good first step. I thank him again as he walks me to the door of his office. He just shakes his head and says, "No need to thank me, kid." On my way out, I pause to talk with Tracy for a moment once I'm in the car. I let out a sigh, but this time it's a sigh of relief. Bud has helped me before by sharing important information from his firm. Now, I need his help again. Monday, 12:12 p.m. 2 hours ago, I felt completely lost about who to choose as my lawyer. I think of Susy, a lawyer many people respect. She's tough and not everyone feels comfortable around her, so who should I ask? I remember a chat I had with Susy about a month ago. She mentioned an old friend from law school who just started working in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Susy told me how she caught him being unfaithful after they had been dating for some time. She broke up with him right away and never looked back. I knew him well, but when Susy and I grew closer, I had to stop hanging out with him. I think he used to practice family law, but after moving to Dallas-Fort Worth, he began working in other areas of law. If anyone can get what I'm going through, it's Bill Benner. Besides, I doubt he would be scared to face off against Susy. After waiting for about half an hour, I am shown into his office. "Bill," I greet him with warmth, reaching out my hand. "Jake," he responds, shaking my hand firmly. "I hear you talked my assistant into giving you 15 minutes, he adds with a slight smile. "That wasn't easy," I say. "I would have kept her around." He looks at his watch and I get the hint. "What can I do for you?" I lean back in my chair and start telling him everything that has happened in the last 4 days. I share details from Friday night all the way to just before I walked into his office. A few times I see him react to my story, but mostly he listens closely. I keep talking until I'm done and ready to ask him questions. He stares at me for a moment. "I can't say I envy your situation," he finally admits. "I don't feel lucky either." "So how can you help?" I say. "There are only 2 lawyers in this town who are brave enough to face Susy. Both of them are in this room. I need someone to help me." "I hope you will say yes, Jake," he replies. "I would agree if I could, but I don't work in family law anymore. I know that. I looked into it a bit before I stopped, and I know you were doing well in that area. I hope you still have at least one family law case left." He looks at me, but I can tell he's thinking about the problem I just shared. He seems to want to help, but he's stuck between what he should do and what he wants to do. I almost say something, but I decide to let him think for a moment. "Jake," he says, "I really want to help you, but I just don't have the time. We have some lawyers at our firm who focus on family law. Let me call them and get you signed up." "Susy would handle them easily, you know that." I cut in. We look at each other for a moment before he takes his hands and puts them together, like they're tied. Yeah, I know, I understand. What if I try one last time? I can get all the drafts ready. I will have to remember my old skills. But if you give me some tips, I'm sure I can make a few drafts that just need a little change from you. This way, you won't have to spend too much time, but I can still use your skills. He looks at me differently now. Will you promise to be not just my helper, but also a good client? You won't try to take over and make this a big show. Oh, man. I laugh. I can't promise that at all. He smiles and leans back in his chair. After a moment, he finally says, I'm a fool. Does that mean you will do it? Yes, but I will probably regret it. Is there another meeting or paperwork that I need to do right now? I'm smiling. Bill, I can't thank you enough. Just wait until you see how much I charge. I laugh. There's no meeting right now. Bud Green has some evidence he's looking at. We think the photos were set up, but we can't prove it. The only thing I have planned is a meeting with Heidi this afternoon and another with the vetting committee in 2 days. Heidi? Miss Beavis may have been your assistant, yes. I don't think it's a good idea for you to meet her. Why not? I can promise you she won't meet with anyone from this firm. It's either me or no one else. I don't like it anyway. Me neither. A lot has happened lately that I don't like. Do you really think she didn't sign that affidavit? I know she did. She wouldn't talk nonsense or lie. There's no way she would sign that affidavit. He leans back in his chair for a moment to think. Finally, he leans forward. Okay, you can talk to her. But I have one condition. I want one of my paralegals to go with you to write down everything that's said. You don't understand. She is very shy and keeps to herself. I know it will be tough to see her alone. If I bring someone I don't know, she probably won't want to meet. Just a little while ago, you said I should take care of everything. I don't want you talking to her without someone else there to see what happens. You seem good at convincing people. I think you can ask her to meet us in front of my assistant. If I'm your lawyer, I won't let you meet with your AA without someone to watch. I smile. Okay, you win. When can your assistant meet? When do you want to see Miss Beavis? Now, if possible. Let me make a call, he says as he picks up the phone. Sure, I reply. And while you do that, I will find a time to see her. I stand up and move to the window. I have Heidi's cell and home phone numbers. I try both numbers, but she doesn't answer. For a moment, I think about leaving a message, but then I decide it's better not to. No luck, I say when I turn back to Bill. Janine is coming here anyway. She is who I want with me to keep track of our meeting. I will just introduce you and then leave you in her good hands. From what you've told me about your life, both before and during your time with Susy, I want others in our firm to look at the divorce papers. No, I will take care of everything. I promise to handle your case, and I will. I'll deal with all the meetings with Susy and her lawyer. But we have a team of smart people here, and I want to use their help. I nod. I understand that this is good advice. Monday, 3:08 p.m. I know I shouldn't do this, but where is she? I think as I look at the front of Heidi's house. I've been trying to call her since I left Bender's office around 1 p.m. Something must be wrong. I get out of the car and walk to her front porch. The first thing I see is that the lawn looks dry and uncut. I check the mailbox and find it empty, which might mean something is off. I close the mailbox and scan the street before walking around the side of the house. I peek through the first window I find, and I'm shocked to see nothing inside. The house seems empty. I feel uneasy and quickly walk around to the other windows. I see the same emptiness everywhere. In just a few minutes, I've gone all the way around the house and stand puzzled in front of it, feeling anxious. Just then, I hear someone behind me. I turn around quickly and see an older man looking at me. I relax a bit and smile. No, I came to town a few days ago and wanted to find an old friend. I could have the wrong address, but is this where Heidi Beavis lives? I ask simply. I'm sorry to tell you, but you just missed her by about a week. She moved out. Really? I ask, surprised. That's too bad. I wanted to laugh with her. Did she move far away? Or does she have a new address? I don't really know, son. I doubt she moved nearby. I went to see her. She was as nice as always, but she didn't share much. Oh, I see. So you think she didn't go to another neighborhood? I can't say for sure. I just have a feeling. Well, I guess there's nothing more to do. It's my loss. But I appreciate your help. I shake his hand and walk back to my car. I can feel him watching me closely as I go. I think if he could figure out where Heidi went, he would. I give him directions, turn around, and head back to Bud's house. It's very unlike Heidi to leave without saying anything, and it doesn't seem right at all. Monday, 4:15 p.m. I tap my pen on my notepad, trying to remember what I did in Houston over the past few days. Has it really been more than a week? Bud asked for a timeline of my movements and as much info as I could find on Weston and Schmidt. I knew where they were most of the time, but there were a few times when we weren't together. I pulled my chair closer to the desk in one of Bud's extra offices. After being worried about Heidi when I visited her home, I went straight to Bud's office to tell him what I found out. I need to contact Heidi to understand why she signed that paper and if she knows anything about the photos. But first, I need to figure out where she moved and why. While driving back to Bud's place, I got a call from one of his investigators. He found the hidden key and was ready to get into the back of my house. I stayed on the line as he unlocked the back door and entered the code for the security alarm. Bud was right. She either forgot or didn't care to change the code. Once he was inside and safe, he made the call. When I got to Bud, I told him about my visit to Heidi's. He chuckled when I mentioned I went there by myself. He grunted a few more times as I shared what I found. He asked me to write down everything I could remember about her name, address, family, and anything else that came to mind. I told him her parents were gone and she had a brother who lived far away. She didn't like to talk about him. I shared everything I knew and he hurried off. Monday, 6:32 p.m. Feeling a bit better, I ended the call in my room. I called my dad to thank him again for everything and to tell him about my day. He made a sound when I told him about how Susy had said something shocking to me. He said he wasn't shocked because of how she talked over the weekend, but he also said he didn't get why she was rushing. He hoped Susy would take her time to calm down and think things through. He told me to hang in there and that everything would be okay in the end. Before I called my dad, I tried to reach Susy. I knew I shouldn't have called her, but I thought maybe I could help us talk again. Sadly, the receptionist wouldn't let me talk to her. She said Miss Vickers was busy with other things. In short, Susy wasn't taking my calls, so I called my father. Mom answered the phone first. When she heard my voice, she hung up right away. I could hear her yelling for me to call Dad. After that, I took a beer from the mini fridge and sat down in the chair by the balcony door. It was too cold to go out on the balcony now, but I could still see the Dallas skyline from inside. While I was taking another sip, my cell phone rang. I looked at it and saw Bud's number. "Hey, Bud," I answered. "Hi, Jake," he said. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." I laughed. "I appreciate that, Bud, but is that really why you called?" "Of course," he said. "I also have some good news that might cheer you up." "Have you found Heidi?" I asked. "No, we're just getting started. You need to be a little patient. Rome wasn't built in a day, you know. So, what do you have for me?" He told me to get a pen and paper because I needed to write things down. 15 minutes later, I was smiling the biggest smile I had since Friday. "We still have a lot to sort out, Jake," Bud said. "But this is a good start. Get some rest today. The next few days will be busy." "Thanks, Bud. You too. And thanks for everything." I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of my warm beer. I looked out at the Dallas skyline. Over the past 2 weeks, it felt like I had lived in hotels forever. I wanted to go home, but I wondered where home was now. I wasn't sure I would be welcome there, even if the ban wasn't in place. I thought, what is Susy doing now? How did she get into all this so quickly? She has always been someone who thinks carefully most of the time. Sure, she could act on impulse, but she usually thought things through. We had our disagreements like any couple, but she always let me share my side. I think I did the same. Why was she in such a hurry? Why was she so angry? How could she take what she saw as revenge so harshly? And with that guy Schmidt, she always knew he was trouble. How could she do that? I took another sip of my beer, and the taste felt bitter as my anger grew inside me. I poured out the rest of my beer and walked back to the mini fridge to grab another one. I plopped down in my chair, feeling a mix of frustration and anger. I think about what Bud just told me. I play with my phone, then decide to call Vicky Gambino. Before I can say anything, she asks if I have changed my mind about the divorce. I tell her I've been thinking about it all day. I have some important news and I want to meet her and Susy to talk about it soon. She asks if I have found a lawyer yet. I say I'm working on it. She promises to get back to me and let me know when they can meet. Half an hour later, she calls back and asks if I can meet at 8 a.m. She says Susy will make time to meet then. I want to point out that Susy doesn't start her day until 9 a.m., so this won't leave her much time. Instead, I say 8 a.m. sounds great. Vicky confirms the meeting will be in her office and hangs up. After that, I try to call Bill Benner, but I can't reach him. I leave him a voicemail about the 8 a.m. meeting. I mention that there's a coffee shop on the first floor of the Gambino building, and if he can come, I will have coffee ready for him at 7:45 to go over some last-minute details. If he can't come, I tell him not to worry. I'll fill him in later when we talk. As I hang up, I realize I might have upset him by making plans without asking. I finish my second mug of beer and then call Bud around 9:30. I want to make sure he knows about my meeting with Susy and Vicky and that I plan to share the info he gave me tonight. I tell Bud I wish Benner could come, but I'm not sure if he can. Bud asks if I have the photos with me. When I say yes, he advises me to use them along with the other details he shared. We say goodnight and plan to meet tomorrow after I talk with Susy and Vicky. Chapter 5. Denial is a River in Africa. Tuesday, 7:45 a.m. I am surprised but happy to see Bill walk into the small lobby by the coffee shop. I smile as I pull out a large coffee and a muffin from a bag on the table. After taking care of the coffee, I start telling him about my talks from last night, especially the one with Bud. I feel a bit better today. After some rough days, things look a little brighter. It would have been great if we had found Heidi, but I can't help but think she can't have gone too far. I believe it's only a matter of time before we find her, and that will help fix everything. Even after what happened on Friday, I still hold on to hope that I can fix my marriage with Susy. I know it won't be easy, and we will need a lot of help along the way. Susy has always been very jealous, almost to the point of being unreasonable. I learned early on that I should not spend too much time with one woman at a party. If I danced more than once with someone else, things would get really tense at home. I saw the photos and knew why she was upset. I understood it in my head, but my heart was still heavy with all this. I couldn't tell if the worst part was the fight we had on Friday night or how much she seems to doubt me. Before we can fix things, I need her to see things more clearly, but by the time that happens, I might not care anymore. As soon as I tell Bill what's been going on, he gets mad at me for setting up this meeting without asking him first. He makes it clear that if I do it again, he'll want me to find someone else to help. I nod, knowing he has a point. After the apology session is over, we spend the next 5 minutes going over our plan for the 8 o'clock meeting. We discuss the pictures I have and the best way to show the information that Bud gave me. We finish up and head to the elevators. Tuesday, 8 a.m. When we walk into Gambino's office, I am surprised to see Vicky waiting for us in the reception area. I let the two lawyers introduce themselves, and then she asks us to follow her. We walk down the hallway to the same room I was in yesterday. Susy is on her cell phone, standing with her back to the door as we come in. Vicky sits on the other side of the table, just like I did the day before. Bill and I sit on the side of the desk closest to the door. As Susy finishes leaving a message, she turns around and sees my lawyer reaching out her hand for a handshake. Susy stops, her hand pulled back slowly. She looks at me, then smiles and sits down. How lovely. She chuckles. 2 thieves in 1 room. Bill and I just keep quiet. We had guessed how Susy would react when Bill introduced us. We weren't too far off, it seems. Vicky turns to my lawyer. Did Mr. Vickers tell me yesterday that he has changed his mind about our asset plan? I glance at Bill. He smiles and responds to both women. Actually, Mr. Gambino, my client never said he changed his mind. He only said he had some important information to share. They both look surprised. Did they really think I would just give in? Susy pushes back from the table in frustration. What are you trying to do to Jake? She demands. Mr. Vickers isn't trying to trick anyone, Mrs. Vickers, Bill says, emphasizing her last name. He has told Mr. Gambino that he has important information and we're ready to show it now. Jake, can you tell us what we found out yesterday? Bill looks at me. I look down at the 2 women. Vicky seems really interested, but it's hard to tell what Susy is thinking because she looks upset. First, we still have the negatives, but we promise to finish with them today. I'll make sure to give them back to you, Vicky, by tomorrow at the latest. Susy just makes a sound in agreement, and Vicky nods back at me. We have looked at the negatives and made larger copies. There are a few things in the pictures that make us worried. I take out a folder from my bag. I open it and take out 3 photos, placing them on the table in front of Susy and Vicky. These 3 photos are the 1st, 4th, and 8th from a set of 8 pictures. I have to admit that the man in these pictures looks a lot like me. We also know this was my hotel room in Houston. The closet door, which happened to be open, shows luggage on the floor that looks like mine. The clothes also appear to be mine. I glance up and see a mix of pride and anger on Susy's face. But there's more to it than that. Is it really sadness? Does she want me to prove that the pictures are not of other men? There are many things in the photos that make us doubt their truthfulness. "That's ridiculous," Susy says loudly as she stands up. "I had my best investigator check these pictures, and he told me they are real and not changed." "We didn't say the pictures were changed," Bill argues. "Then what are you saying?" Susy replies firmly. "That's exactly what it sounds like." Now it's Vicky's turn. She puts her hand on Susy's arm to calm her down. "First of all, we are still studying the pictures, so this is just the start," I say. "In other words, you can't prove anything," Vicky says now. "Some of what we found is just our guess, and some details are not certain. We think we will have much more information today." "Like what?" Vicky asks. "Right. I'm not interested in their lies and stories anymore," Susy declares. "We have to listen to them, Susy," Vicky complains. "It'll either be here or in court." "Fine," Susy replies, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "First, we noticed that all the pictures were taken between 1:30 and 1:32. That's a very short time. If someone was taking pictures secretly like a private investigator, there would be more than 8 pictures, and they would have been taken over a longer time." I pause, hoping for a reaction. Vicky just urges me to continue. "The second thing we notice is that the man in the picture doesn't move at all during this time, not even a little bit. The clock shows this lasts at least 1 minute and 2 seconds, maybe up to 3 minutes. I look right at Susy. "Susy, the man in this picture didn't move at all for 3 minutes. Who can stay completely still for that long?" I sighed and found it hard to keep going. We also want to say that these photos look like they were set up, just like Bud said yesterday. "Set up? How did you figure that out?" Vicky asked. "First, look at the calendar and the clock. They are turned to face the camera, not the bed or the rest of the room." I paused and took out a piece of paper from my folder. This is a drawing of the room with measurements. You can see that the bed is only about 4 feet from the outside wall. There is no chair or table in this part of the room, just a floor lamp. There is no good reason for the calendar and alarm clock to face the window instead of the bed, except that it helps the person taking the pictures know the exact time. "That's a big leap," Vicky said back. "Everything you've said is just guesses." "Actually," Bill quickly said, "it doesn't make sense for the clock to be turned to the window. Can you give me one good reason why?" "Sure," Vicky replied. "Mr. Vickers got up in the morning, hit the snooze button, and turned the clock around." Susy let out a short laugh. I looked at Vicky in surprise. She had been calm and professional and didn't take cheap shots. I realized that she was on Susy's side, yet she stayed collected. I couldn't help but stare at her. She held my gaze for 5 seconds and then turned her head a little. "Do you have a cute answer for the calendar, too?" I asked coldly. "What's wrong with the calendar?" Susy asked. "You're cute, too," I replied even more coldly. "But maybe you didn't ask the hotel if they use calendars with large print for just 1 day at a time. If you had looked into it at all, instead of just believing a man who is my enemy, you would know that they don't have calendars in the rooms." I know for sure that I didn't put that calendar in my room. So who did? Who put it in there? Why is it turned toward the window? I paused, hoping to remember some detail. "Susy, do you remember what day I left Houston on my last trip?" Susy just sat at the table with her arms crossed and stared at me. I sighed again. "Let me remind you, it was Sunday the 15th. "Whatever you say," she replied. "You know what my travel plan was?" "I know what you told me." I frowned, feeling frustrated. I reached into my bag and pulled out another folder, opening it up. I put 2 papers on the table. The first was my plane ticket from Houston to Austin. The second was my hotel check-in after lunch in Austin. Look, both show the 15th of the month. Okay, you were in Austin on the 15th. So what? In the photos in front of you, what date is on this surprising calendar? Susy doesn't move. Her eyes stay on my face, watching me. I see Vicky leaning in. It says the 15th. That's right, I reply. The night of the 14th, Weston Schmidt and I had just finished a big deal in Houston in one of the hotel conference rooms. Our whole group went out to celebrate, except for Heidi, who never joins us for drinking. I'm not sure about Schmidt, but I know Weston had quite a few drinks. I had 1 beer and then switched to water. But think about it. Do you know anyone who flips to the next day's date on a calendar before they go to sleep? Isn't it strange that this calendar magically shows the right date at 1:30 in the morning? Didn't you find it odd, Susy, that Schmidt gave you old photos? Why use an old camera that works with film? A professional might still use a film camera, but almost everyone else uses digital cameras these days. Maybe Schmidt was worried that you would think digital pictures are fake since they can be. Didn't that seem fishy to you? Did you notice that the camera had a flash? You can see the shadow of the chair on the wall because of the flash. That made it easy to recognize the 2 people in bed. So if you thought these photos were taken secretly, they were clearly not. And since a flash was used, the pictures couldn't have been taken from far away through a hotel window. So whoever was in that bed either knew about the camera or was out of it. And even if you think I'd be foolish enough to let myself be photographed like that, you know Heidi would never allow it. I look at Susy for a moment. I see her expression change as she starts to think clearly. For a brief moment, I see hope. Then, just as quickly, her face goes back to a hard, serious look. "What is your reason for coming here, Jake?" Susy asks. "Did you come to impress us with how good you are at lying and telling the truth? What have you proven?" "Fine, I will agree that the picture was taken in that room. But what does that prove? That you're really dumb? You keep talking about calendars and clocks and bags. What have you shown us?" "You know what? It's still a picture of you and Heidi in that bed. It's still a picture of you 2 having a good time. I will never forgive you for being unfaithful to Jake. Ever. Do you get that? Now just leave and stop wasting our time." I look at Bill. He shrugs. He turns back to the 2 women and looks directly at Vicky. "It has become clear to Jake and me that no matter what proof we show, it won't change your client's mind. I think that even if Schmidt comes here and tells the truth, she won't change her story. In that case, we're leaving. But before we go, we have a few more things to say. First, we haven't made a decision yet about charging your client with hurting someone and holding them against their will. That's just the start. And if she has someone else saying where she was, you might want to remind her that as a lawyer, she could get in trouble for lying or for getting others to lie too. Are you saying my client did something wrong, Mr. Benner?" Vicky asked quickly. "Not right now." "No, but you should tell your client that the hospital where she and Schmidt left my client on Friday night, who was unconscious, has a new high-definition video system. It's a very good system since we can see her license plate, and we can also see her and Schmidt arguing. We have an expert who can read lips and should be able to tell us what they were arguing about." As Bill talks, I sit back and watch Susy's face change color. She clearly knows what would happen if she lied, and we showed proof that she was lying. She also understands that her chances of denying the affair are weaker now, just like her defense against the claim that she hurt me. Bill keeps talking. "We have looked at the divorce papers, and there are 3 things we will argue and not discuss. First, the house was given to my client before he married Miss Vickers, and we will not give up any part of it. Second, we won't give up any part of the severance pay that might be offered. My client is willing to just quit his job rather than share any of the severance money that came from your client's actions. Also, if we find out that your client was part of this from the start, we will give all proof to the state officials. One more thing. My client will not sign any divorce papers saying he is guilty of cheating. We are giving you until Friday to take back the current divorce request and file a new one saying there are irreconcilable differences instead. If this doesn't happen by the end of business on Friday, we will file a countersuit on Monday saying your client cheated, This could become a big news story. We expect to have more forensic information in the coming days, and we will send anything we find to Mrs. Gambino's office. It might be wise to talk again when we have more information. Silence filled the room. That would be pointless. Susy finally speaks up, her face returning to its normal color. "He's a cheater," she says, pointing at me. "I won't be with a cheater," she adds. "You're wrong, Susy. I never cheated on you," I reply, holding back my anger. We both know she was unfaithful to me. Susy waves her hand at the 3 pictures Bill is carrying. "But you cheated on Jake," she says. Just as Bill and I get up to leave, we stop when we hear Bill's voice. "Susy," Bill says, "are you really sure Jake cheated on you?" "Yes," she answers coldly. "Are you sure there's no chance you could be mistaken? That you misunderstood?" Bill asks. "Misunderstood?" Susy gasps. "Look at the pictures and the statements. How can you misunderstand that? Heidi was sitting on his lap." "Are you as sure Jake cheated as you are that I cheated?" Bill suddenly asks. I turn fully to look at him. What is he doing? He shouldn't bring up their past right now. Susy ignores me and glares at Bill. "Yes, I'm just as sure," she says sharply. "And I'm even sure you cheated on me. I saw you hugging and kissing that girl." Bill looks at her closely. 10 years ago, you never let me explain," he says. "What's there to explain?" Susy replies with a smirk. "I saw what you both were doing. She was definitely going to your room." "I know I'm right. You two are both liars and cheats, just like Susy says." Bill starts to turn away, looking upset. His face is red with anger. I start to regret asking him to help me. Suddenly, he turns back to Susy, takes an old photo from his shirt pocket and tries to hand it to her. She pulls back like he's a snake. Bill lets the photo fall on the table in front of her. I can't help but glance at it. It shows a cute blonde girl, her short hair framing her face. "Do you recognize her?" Bill asks. Susy looks at him, then back at the photo. "Yes, I know her," she says with a scoff. "How could I forget? This is the same girl I saw you with." If I thought Bill was angry before, I was wrong. Now his anger is fierce. "That girl, as you call her, is my little sister. She was 20 that day in Austin, not 18, and she didn't come to see me for anything like that. She was going to spring break in Corpus Christi from Washington State University. She knew she would have a layover in Austin, so she made time to visit her brother. She hadn't seen him in 2 years, and she was happy to hug and kiss him. "I wanted to introduce you to Bill," he said as he picked up a picture and put it back in his pocket. Bill looked at me, and I wondered if she was mistaken. "Shall we go, Jake?" He nodded toward the door. As Bill opened the door, I glanced back at Susy. Her mouth was open in surprise. When she saw me looking at her, her usual serious face came back. It was like a curtain dropping over her. I thought to myself, I don't know who you are anymore. I turned and followed Bill outside. As I was closing the door behind me, I heard Susy shout, "Screw you! Screw both of you!" I stopped and opened the door again, poking my head inside. I looked straight at Susy. "Screw you!" I replied coldly. "Since you've wasted yourself by being with that jerk Schmidt, you'll never have me again." I closed the door and walked with Bill toward the reception area, shaking my head. No one wins in these situations, I thought. With nowhere else to go, I stayed at Bud's place. I wasn't fired, but I definitely wasn't welcome in the office anymore. Bill had to return to his office after our meeting with Susy and Vicky. He told me it would be tough for him to get through the day and to inform Janine of any new updates, according to Tracy. Bud was somewhere in Houston, following a lead. I wished he'd waited for me so I could join him, but Tracy said he left first thing in the morning. The worst part was feeling like my life was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. I had good people working with me, but I've always been someone who likes to get things done myself. Waiting was making me nuts. The report Tracy gave me from Bud didn't help much. The tapes from my house last night showed nothing important. It had been a terrible day, and it was just beginning. Today felt even worse than yesterday. At least yesterday I was busy, even if I was just running around in circles. I noticed my feelings about Susy and marriage were slowly changing. It was getting harder to see how I could move on. I was still struggling over her betrayal from Friday night. Now, I was starting to think she might be part of the setup. If I found out she was involved, I would have a lot to repay. I remembered this morning's meeting. As we were leaving, I asked Bill about the trick he pulled at the end of the meeting. It annoyed me. No, it wasn't just anger. It was jealousy. He got to her. He waited 10 years, but he finally had his shot. I really don't want to wait much longer. A knock on the door makes me jump a little, and I look up from my desk. Tracy walks in, and I borrow Bud's phone to talk to her. "Bud's on the phone for you," she says. I grab the phone and say, "Bud?" As I do, Tracy leans over my desk for a moment. I catch a nice glimpse of her blouse. Tracy smiles at me, knowing where I'm looking. She presses a button on the phone, and I hear Bud talking to someone. Tracy hits the hands-free button, and Bud's voice comes through. "What took you so long? Did Tracy need to teach you how to use the phone?" "If you only knew how true that is," I laugh. Tracy smiles back at me, then straightens up and walks back to her desk, swinging her hips a little as she goes. "I wish I could join you, Bud." "Sure, but you'd just slow me down. I found some important info here." "Before you tell me anything, can you set up a meeting with Benner for tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow? That's going to be tough. I have a meeting at the firm and I need to give them my answer. Bill and I didn't have much time to look over their offer." "Well, you need to hear what I found out before you meet with them, especially before you see your wife and her lawyer. Can you share what you've learned so far?" "I wish I could, but everything isn't ready. It's better to keep things quiet until I'm sure. We need to meet tonight. We need to plan a time for the three of us to talk, and it needs to be late since you'll be busy all day. I need you to go to Houston right away." "Right now?" "Yes. But first, set up that meeting." "Okay, I'll do it. I'll have Tracy book a flight while I get a meeting ready for tonight. Is 9 o'clock late enough? And where can I meet you when I arrive?" "Not until 9 o'clock. Actually, let's make it 10 o'clock at night. Set the meeting at my office in Dallas while you're in Houston. You'll have some work to do. We have details about your secretary. She's really here." "Are you serious?" "Yes. I know you need to talk to her. Write down the address and get over here." I quickly write down the address Bud gives me. He reminds me again to make the meeting for tonight, and then we hang up. I start my day by calling Janine. I walk over to Tracy's desk at the front. Janine picks up on the first ring, and I quickly let her know that I'm looking for Heidi. In no time, she tells me there is no way I can meet Heidi by myself. She insists that I should book a plane ticket for both of us. She says she will meet me at the airport. I hand my American Express card to Tracy and ask her to work her magic and find us 2 tickets. I tell her to look for the first flight to Houston and a return flight that lands at Love Field around 9 p.m. Tracy starts typing on the keyboard. I head back to my temporary office, gather my things, and get ready to leave for the airport. When I come back to Tracy's desk, she is finishing up the ticket booking. I give her a playful slap on the cheek as she hands me 2 tickets and our flight details. I quickly call Janine to share the flight information and let her know exactly where to meet me at the airport. We will both have to hurry to make it on time. Just as I hang up, I remember that Bud mentioned I should set up a meeting for Bill tonight. I ask Janine if she can make the appointment for 10 o'clock, since our flight lands at 9 p.m. She agrees to find someone to arrange it. It's now Tuesday at 3:49 p.m. in Houston. I remind Janine softly, just remember she might be shy. I will introduce you and explain why you're here. Just smile and nod, okay? She looks at me, smiles, and nods. I chuckle. It's one of the few times I've smiled in the last few days. I look around the building where Bud says Heidi is living now. I shake my head, hoping this is only a short stay for both of us. The front door has no security, so we just walk in and go up the stairs to the second floor. The hallway is clean but not very bright. We walk down the hall and soon find ourselves in front of office 211B. I let out a nervous sigh and glance at Janine. I knock on the door. At first, there is no answer, but then I hear footsteps coming closer. I watch as the chain rattles, and after 2 deadbolts, the door swings open to reveal a very surprised Heidi. After these past few days, I'm not sure what to expect from her. I see her eyes fill with tears, and suddenly she steps forward and gives me a big hug. When she pulls away, she blushes a bit, and a hint of her old self comes back. She smiles shyly at me, and only then does she notice Janine. "I can't believe you're here, Mr. Vickers. I don't even know how you found me, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised," she says, looking at Janine. I notice her eyes linger on Janine's tight blouse and skirt. "Mr. Vickers," she says, in a tone that seems a bit judgmental. Heidi, you've been calling me Jake for 10 years. I don't see why you should change that now. She gives a small smile but looks carefully at Janine like she doesn't trust her. Then it hits me. If I'm right, Heidi doesn't know what's happening in Dallas and is wondering why I'm here with Janine. Janine, meet Heidi Beavis, my assistant. Actually, she's my go-to person and my moral compass. Heidi, this is Janine Prescott. She works in law. I think about saying more, but less is better right now. Heidi looks confused, then steps aside awkwardly to let us in. I have visited Heidi's home in Dallas a few times to help her fix things. I know most of her family is here in Houston. My last trip didn't go well, and that's part of why Heidi came along this time. Heidi takes us into a small living room and asks us to sit down. She offers us something to drink, but we both say no politely. You're hard to read, Heidi. She looks confused and a bit worried. I'm sorry I had to leave so quickly. I wanted to stay longer to help find someone good to replace me, but they said not to worry and that I should be here in Houston to help my brother. I sense that Heidi has been piecing together some clues, but I'm not sure which ones. Heidi, are you okay? I ask genuinely. Are you in trouble? She looks puzzled again. Yes, I'm fine. I was more worried about you. I tried calling you this morning, but no one answered. Then I tried to call Mr. Weston, but they said he wasn't available. So I called the front desk to ask for you, and they told me you don't work there anymore. Mr. Vickers, are you in trouble? I was told it's just a routine thing. You didn't lose your job because of me, did you? She looks at Janine suspiciously, who is now sitting across from me. I try not to notice Janine or what she's wearing. I have to focus on Heidi. Suddenly I feel stuck, not knowing what to say. I look at Janine, but she doesn't seem to care. Finally, I ask Heidi to just tell me what's going on. Janine and I came all this way to check on you. Heidi stares at me, confused. She gives Janine an angry look, but Janine just smiles. Didn't Miss Hinkley tell you what happened? She promised to explain why I had to leave. No. Please sit down and tell me. That sounds terrible, Jake. I knew it was coming, but it's still bad news. Just stay calm and explain it to me. It's about my brother, Bumper. He keeps getting into trouble. Yes, that one. Jake, he really messed up this time. They caught him buying drugs. This is the third time the DA has told him he's going to jail. You know, Bumper wouldn't hurt a fly. Can you imagine what those hard criminals would do to him in jail? When did all this happen? I ask nervously. Last week, Heidi replies. Right after you left Houston? Yes. Why didn't you call me and tell me? She looks at me confused. I didn't call because I knew you were busy at work in San Antonio. I didn't want to bother you with my problems about Jake. I guess you had to. So how are things now? What can I do to help, Jake says, looking very puzzled. What, don't you know? Know what? I ask, feeling just as confused. My eyes catch Janine in a strange pose, and I can't tell if she's dressed properly. Oh, my brother, silly girl. You sent Miss Hinkley here to help me, Heidi says, pushing my thoughts away from Janine to her face. I quickly look at Janine, and her sly smile tells me she's up to something. Miss Hinkley showed up, right? Did she help you? She didn't call you back at all. I think about playing along to see how it ends, but I shake my head and focus. Heidi, I didn't send Miss Hinkley here, so why don't you tell me what happened? Heidi looks at me in surprise and slowly sits up. I glance at Janine again, and now she's moved her knees a bit more, showing me that she doesn't have anything under her skirt. I clear my throat and force myself to look back at Heidi. I thought she came to my house in Dallas because you sent her. I think that's what she said. Now, tell me what really happened, Heidi. For the next 20 minutes, Heidi shares everything about Hinkley's visit. She first learned about her brother on Monday while at work. She quickly went to Tom Weston, my boss, and asked for time off to deal with her family issue. Tom agreed, and Heidi planned to go to Houston on Tuesday night. While she was getting ready, her doorbell rang, and she was surprised to see Miss Hinkley, the Human Resources Director, at her door. Heidi let her in, and Hinkley started to share her own story about her brother, who had also struggled with drugs. Heidi explained that Hinkley has connections in both the Houston police and the prosecutor's office. She offered to make some calls and help Heidi. Hinkley said she might be able to get Heidi's brother put into a rehab center instead of sending him to jail. I pause for a moment and ask Heidi if she knows how Hinkley found out about Bumper. Heidi looks at me, confused for a bit, then says Mr. Weston must have told him. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Janine writing something on her small PDA. I realize she is making sure we keep track of what's going on. I turn back to Heidi and ask her to keep telling her story. Heidi is clearly excited about her brother possibly not going to jail. She happily agrees to Hinkley's plan, and true to his word, her brother goes to a rehab center. Heidi has been in Houston since last Tuesday and plans to move here for good to support her brother. She has already reached out to a real estate agent to sell her apartment in Dallas. I know Heidi's parents are divorced, her father is missing, and her mother often drinks too much. But everything seems to be okay. I feel a bit suspicious, thinking about how close Hinkley and Schmidt are. I suddenly remember the old saying about gifts from Greeks and feel wary. If life were perfect, my brother wouldn't be struggling with drugs, but the rehab center he is in looks very promising. I hope he will be able to stop using. I smile, genuinely happy for Heidi. In the time I've known her, she has faced many challenges for her brother and her family. I think about whether I should mention the affidavit but decide against it. Heidi has enough going on. Do you have a partner? Heidi asks out of the blue, pulling my thoughts back. No, Heidi, I reply, thinking about how that is not true. Really? She says in surprise. You don't have to worry, Heidi. Everything will work out in time. But then she says, Miss Hinkley told me it was already decided when I saw her last Tuesday. I respond in shock, looking at Janine. Yes, Jake, Heidi says. She made me sign a paper about how much you've done for the company. I repeat this with even more surprise. Did you sign the affidavit? I ask. No, it wasn't an affidavit. I've worked for you long enough to know the difference. It was just a progress report, she explains. She had me sign the second page and put my name on both pages. There were 2 pages and you said it was great. Yes, well, the first page looked nice. The second page mentioned your leadership skills and said that it needed work, she tells me. I asked Miss Hinkley about it, and she said all reports had to include something negative, no matter how well someone was doing. I stare at Heidi for a moment, trying to understand what she is saying. Then it hits me. They copied Heidi's signature. I opened the briefcase I had with me and took out a yellow folder that had the papers inside. I carefully grabbed it and turned to the second page. I held it out to Heidi. Heidi, is this the second page you meant? Heidi squinted for a moment, then quickly read the short paragraph. Yeah, I think that's what I signed last week. But I don't get all this notary stuff. There wasn't a notary here last week. It was just me and Miss Hinkley. Before I could stop her, Heidi turned the first page. I stood up to try and take the paper from her, but Heidi reads fast, and in just a few seconds, she read enough to stand up and turn away from me so I couldn't get the document. Oh my God, she said. I sighed and sat back down, letting her read everything. I glanced at Janine, who was sitting quietly with her legs crossed. She was watching what was happening with interest. Heidi slowly sat down in the closest chair, her face turning red. She kept whispering, "Oh my God," over and over. She finished the first page and flipped to the second, as if expecting it to say something very different. For a long moment, she stared at the paper. How? Why, Jake? She asked, her voice shaky. Calm down, I replied. I felt the same way the first time I saw this. What does that mean, Jake? She asked. It says that we had a secret relationship. It says you made me do things with you. Heidi covered her face with her hands and started crying. I almost got up to comfort her, but Janine reminded me to be careful. Heidi, I need to ask you something that I already know the answer to. Did you sign that affidavit? No, she said firmly. I signed your performance evaluation, not that other paper. You didn't sign it? I asked. No, but the second page. Does it look familiar? Is that the page you signed? But the first page is different, she argued. No, I mean yes. The second page is the same. The first page is a bunch of lies. I would never do anything like that. We would never do anything like that. And you would never do this to Susy, I said. Will you sign a legal affidavit saying you didn't sign this document as it is now? Definitely, she replied, her voice getting more angry. What does all this mean, Jake? Are you in trouble? Am I in trouble? Is Miss Hinkley behind this? What will happen to my brother? Oh my God, what does it all mean? It's going to be okay, Heidi, I said softly. Don't worry. You didn't do anything wrong. The most important thing is that you stay here in Houston and look after your family and your brother, okay? Don't worry about anything else. I will handle it. Just keep me updated on what's happening in your life. Heidi snorted and nodded. But what about you, Jake? We're talking about the claim that you forced yourself on me. I smiled to ease her worries. You don't need to worry about me, Heidi. Those who know me understand the truth. Your signature on the statement will clear up any other issues. And what about Susy? Does she know about this? She asked. I nodded. Oh my God, how is she feeling? It must be terrible. She doesn't think I believe that you and I did anything. Susy's having a hard time with everything. But don't worry, I know she still thinks of you kindly, just like before all this happened. Don't stress. She can't really think you and I did anything. It's just one page, and that one is clearly fake. The issue is that you are so honest. Your signature on that first paper, even if it was forged, carries a lot of weight. I paused. Heidi looked at me, concerned. Jake, what? I realized there were pictures. Pictures? How can there be pictures? We've never been together. I shrugged. You have them. I looked over at Janine. She smiled and shrugged. They are really upsetting Heidi. I sighed and pulled out another folder from my briefcase. You better sit down, Heidi. Heidi slowly sat down, keeping her eyes on the folder. Once she was settled, I handed her the folder. She glanced at me one last time and opened it. Oh my God, she muttered, her face turning bright red. She studied each photo, repeating, oh my God, more and more as she looked at all 8 pictures. When she finished, she tucked the glossy photos back into the folder and handed it to me. I can see how people could be misled by these pictures, Heidi finally said. She looked up at me. But that's not us. That's not me. I don't have a tattoo. Tattoos? I exclaimed. I opened the folder and looked at the photos again. Look at the last picture, Heidi said quietly. I moved to the last picture. I scanned it closely but didn't see anything at first. Just as I was about to ask Heidi about the tattoo, I noticed a faint outline above the sheet. Wow, I said softly. This could be important. Do you mind if we add a note to the statement saying you don't have a tattoo? Heidi nodded. Janine quickly typed up the statement on her laptop and printed it out using a small, handy printer. Since she is also a notary public, she could sign the document. It was hard to believe, but in just a few hours, we had uncovered a lot of strange events and raised doubts about the idea that Heidi and I were in that bed. I stood up to leave and walked over to Heidi to give her a hug. She hugged me back tightly. I'm sorry, Jake, she said softly. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry too, Heidi, I replied. I reply and hug her one last time. Then Janine and I walk Heidi to the door. I wish her good luck and remind her to call me if she needs help. I tell her I want her to call me at least a couple of times a week, no matter what. She nods with a little laugh, and Janine and I close the door behind us as we head to the car. Janine and I don't say anything as we put on our seatbelts and get out of Heidi's car. I shake my head while we drive through the streets near the airport. When we arrive at the departure terminal, I stop the car and park it by the curb. I say, you go check in. I'll return the car and catch up with you later. She looks at me, puzzled. I could ride with you to the rental place. We don't need to fight over a car or shuttle. Plus, you have a big bag with all your things. You go ahead and I'll join you later. She thinks for a moment and shrugs. I think she understands that our time together has come to an end. She reaches for the car door but then stops and asks, Don't you trust me, Jake? I look straight into her eyes and say nothing. I can feel my heart. She laughs and gets out, glancing back through the window. Jake, you still have a lot to learn. I watch her walk into the terminal and I think, not likely. I'm glad there are things I still have yet to learn. Not that I want to learn those things, especially from her. It's Tuesday at 9:48 p.m. Janine and I drive back to Dallas-Fort Worth and quickly go our separate ways. I'm thankful the flight from Houston was short since we hardly talked. I guess she didn't like how I brushed her off at the terminal. I have a feeling not many men have done that to her. I pick up my car from the short-term parking lot and head to Bud's office to meet Bill. We will go over the latest news and make plans. When I get to Bud's office, I see that Bill's car is already there. I walk in and am surprised to see Tracy still working. Have you been here all day? I ask. No, I left this afternoon because I knew I'd have to open again today, but Bud isn't here yet. He called about 10 minutes ago and said he just got off the freeway and would be here soon. And your lawyer is already here. She gestures to the conference room. I start to turn toward the conference room when the office door opens and Bud walks in with a big smile. "Thanks, Tracy," he says. "Why don't you go home and tell your husband I'll make it up to him for making you stay so late?" Tracy smiles and grabs her purse to leave. She kept the place open for us while waiting for Bud to return. "I promise to make it up to her," Bud says. "You sure will," he adds, asking her if my lawyer is there, and she nods. He asks her to wait a minute while he gets the two of us set up in his office. She tells him she already sent my lawyer to the meeting room. He nods to show he understands. Bud and I go into the meeting room and I introduce Bud to Bill. Bill tells us to make ourselves comfortable while he checks some other parts of the investigation through a slightly open door. We can hear him talking to Tracy for a few minutes. Then he thanks her for staying and tells her to go home. He is gone for a couple of minutes and then comes back into the meeting room. "Sorry to keep you both waiting," Bud says as he walks around our chairs to sit at the other end of the table. "I wanted to get the latest updates from Tracy and the team," he explains, relaxing in his chair. Bud looks at me with a grin. "I'm sorry," he says. "I know it's not funny, but you look really stressed. Let's get started, okay? What do you think?" I'm ready to go. I feel like I might burst. Bud laughs again. "All right, first, let's look at the original document. They say your secretary signed it." He pulls out the original document and puts it on the table. "First, Jake, do you know anything about printers and the Secret Service?" "The Secret Service?" I ask. "Yes, the U.S. Secret Service is part of the Treasury Department. Everyone knows they protect the president, but they were also created to protect the country's money supply from fake bills. This is where the Secret Service comes in. What does the Secret Service have to do with Susy and me?" I ask, feeling a bit worried. "Nothing, except they've done us a big favor. With computers now, especially printers and copies, it's much easier to print something that looks like a $20 bill. To make a good fake bill, you need the right paper and special watermarks. But it is possible to print something that looks real at first. The Secret Service convinced most printer companies to put an almost invisible mark on every sheet of paper. Almost every color printer sold in the U.S. prints an invisible, special code on each piece of paper. You can only see this mark with special ultraviolet light. Even if you knew how to find it, the code wouldn't mean anything to you." I'm starting to feel worried. "Are you saying we can find out what printer printed these papers?" "Not just that," he says. "Since printers are connected to computers, and computers keep track of time, this invisible mark has the printer's code along with the date and time it was printed. If you find this mark and know how to read it, you can find out which printer made a piece of paper, and even the exact day and time it was printed. Actually, seeing the mark is very easy. You just need the right light. The tough part is figuring out what the mark means. The problem is that every printer company has made its own system. But luckily, I know someone who has those systems. I showed him your statement." "What did he find out?" Bill asks before I can say anything. Both sheets of paper came from the same printer. "Oh," I say, hoping for something different. "But they were printed at different times," he says with a smile. "Different times?" I ask, surprised. "Yes, both sheets were printed on January 17th. The second sheet was printed first at 7:03 a.m. The first sheet was printed 15 hours later at 10:13 p.m. "How can that be?" I ask, shocked. "That's the day Heidi said she signed the statement, but she also said she flew to Houston that afternoon. She was in the air when the first page was printed. She couldn't have signed it." "That's right, Jake. But how did her initials get on it? Clearly, Heidi didn't write them." To be honest, it wasn't a great effort to make a fake document. The second page was printed on a laser printer, while Heidi's initials look real and are written in black ink. We might even find out what pen was used by looking at the ink, but that's too much. The key point is that Heidi's initials on the first page were printed with toner. "Oh my God," I said softly, realizing this proves the original statement was a lie. I get that toner is different from ink, but were the initials on the first page printed exactly like the second page? "You're thinking correctly, kid. You're smart, despite what your dad says," he grinned. "We checked, and the two initials are not exactly the same. We don't know exactly how it was done, but I believe Heidi's signature was scanned from the original first page, then changed a bit, and put on the fake first page. That page was then printed. I wish the initials matched, but at least we finally have proof that this whole thing was fake. There's one more thing, Jake, Bill said. I make a lot of progress because I know many people. I swap favors all the time. Bill laughed. And who do you swap favors with? Bud? Bud looked at Bill, smirking. I can't tell you who, but I do know Jake's firm rents the 14th and 15th floors in a downtown Dallas building. And I know that security for the whole building is handled by another company, and you need a pass to get into any office. Don't tell me, I smiled. Yes, a friend of a friend accidentally printed out the access log for the 2 floors your firm uses on January 17th, from midnight to midnight on the 18th. I asked, eager to know more. See for yourself, he grinned, tossing the printed log onto the desk while Bill looked over my shoulder with interest. I quickly looked over the report, focusing on the first part of the day. A few people were checking in and out early in the morning. I thought they were either maintenance or security workers, but 2 entries caught my eye. At 6:23 a.m., 2 badges were used on the 15th floor just seconds apart. I glanced at Bud, feeling let down. We have 2 interesting badge numbers, but who do they belong to? Bud, have a little faith. He took a second printout from the same folder and dropped it on the table between Bill and me. I chuckled. Do you love dragging this out? Bill grabbed the second printout, which seemed to list all the badge numbers for everyone in the building. We leaned over to read it together, searching for the 2 numbers that matched the 623 on my list. There it is, Bill said. Evelyn J. Hinkley. Forget her, I muttered. I handed Bill the other number and watched him flip through pages. Timothy K. Schmidt, he said. I leaned back slowly in my chair. I'm going to deal with that guy. When I looked up, Bud was staring at me. He then turned to Bill. Jake, I know what you're thinking, and I'm sure your lawyer knows too. Trust me, it's not worth it to end up in jail over a woman. He glanced at Bill again and went on. I'll share a personal story someday, but don't dwell on this and make plans. You've got a tough road ahead, and you don't need criminal charges on top of what you're already facing. I thought about Bud's words and nodded, settling back in my chair. He was right. But Jake, we've gathered plenty of proof, so let's not focus on just one detail. We've pointed out some major problems in those statements, but remember, pictures tell 1,000 words, right? So let's take a closer look at the photos. I had someone I trust check the negatives, and I'm sure these pictures haven't been altered. The person who took these photos used regular film, not a digital camera. A digital photo can easily be called fake, no matter if it's real or not, but it's much harder to change a negative using a brush. I don't know if it was done on purpose, but they made a set of evidence that isn't strongly supported. I'm sorry, Jake, but the pictures seem real, and I have to believe you are the one in them. Bud stared at me for a moment before he went on. We think the photos were staged, and we can prove it with small pieces of evidence. For one, we know someone else took the photos. The only way one of the 2 people in the picture could have used the camera by themselves is with a remote control and a tripod. My examiner looked closely at several photos, focusing on what was on the nightstand. The first 3 photos were taken from almost the same spot and time. We know they were all taken at 1:30 a.m. In all 3 photos, Jake's body is in the same position. In the 4th photo, things start to change a bit. The time shows 1:31 a.m., and this picture is different because it shows some movement from you that the other 4 photos do not. Your body position looks just like the one in the 4th photo. Unless you're counting my wife, it's strange that someone doesn't move at all in this situation. There's another point about the 4th photo. The expert I showed the pictures to thinks the camera moved about a foot to the left. How did you see that? Bill asks. It's the calendar and clock on the nightstand, I reply. I pull out 2 more photos from the folder, look at them, and then show them to Bill. Pointing to the first new photo, Bud says, This is a close-up of the nightstand from the 3rd photo. See how the calendar is in front and to the right of the clock? The left edge of the calendar is overlapping the right edge of the clock. Now look at the same view from the 4th photo. We pay close attention and see what Bud means. The close-up of the 4th photo shows a small space between the calendar and the clock. I see that, I say. That space could only happen if the clock, calendar, or camera moved, and it's clear that the clock and calendar did not move. Exactly, Bud says. My expert even thought the camera moved about a foot to the left. I told him how tall you are, and he worked out how far it is from your waist to the top of your head. Based on that, he figured the camera was about 9 feet away. Knowing that, he could use math to find out how far the camera moved, Bud explains. That's impressive, Bill says. Now we have proof that at least one other person was in the room. Oh, this is just the beginning, Bill. I had a great trip to Houston, Bud says with a laugh. What else did you find? I ask, eager to know more. Bud chuckles again. Calm down, kid. Are you excited about something tonight? He says, but then he suddenly pauses. Sorry, Jake. I didn't mean to say that. I shake my head and tell him it's fine. He continues a bit shyly. Most of my time in Houston was spent at the hotel where you stayed, Jake. I talked to the bellhops since they know a lot about what happens at hotels. I found a young guy there who would tell me all sorts of things if I showed him a picture of Grant. I showed him one of those pictures and asked about the calendar. He said they don't keep anything like that in the rooms. A calendar like that could only be there if a guest brought it in. The bellhop started acting like a detective. He jumped on the photo and said the water bottle didn't come from the hotel. I asked him how he knew that. He explained that the hotel had a deal with Ice Mountain for water, but the one I had was Aquafina. So I turned to Jake and asked, "Did you bring water to the room?" He looked unsure and said no. It was hard for him to remember. He was sure he didn't leave the hotel to get it. You see, I don't handle alcohol well. I mostly drink water when I'm there. The only water I had was what was in the lobby or the minibar. You told me on Monday that you and some friends were out celebrating Saturday night. What did you drink? Jake replied, I had iced tea with dinner, then just one beer and some water after that. Then he suddenly remembered something. We bought a couple of mugs together. Jake said he was being cheap because he was just drinking water by then. He recalled that Schmidt got the last glass. Schmidt said he needed to use the restroom and brought back the drinks. Jake didn't even need water, but Schmidt gave him a bottle anyway, and he drank it. Now, Jake thought he took that half-full bottle to his room. He felt really tired, so he went to bed. He couldn't remember anything after that until the next morning. Jake looked at Bud and asked, "What are you smiling about?" Bud replied, "What you just told me fits with what I've learned." "Do you know something else?" Bill asked. Bud said, "Oh yes, something important. I made a friend with a messenger and he helped me out. I had to pay him to find something." I was curious and asked what it was. When I first entered the hotel, I noticed the security cameras. I asked the bellhop if they were just in the lobby. He told me they were also at the front desk and near the elevators on each floor. I wanted to know if he could figure out what room you were in and if they had the entry available on January 15th. That was the day I had to pay the guy, but I thought it was worth it. Bud reached into his bag and pulled out a VHS tape. He got up and walked to the TV. He had already watched it a few times, so it was ready to play. Bud pressed the play button and an image appeared on the screen. It showed the hallway. On the left were elevator doors. On the right was a small shop and an old ashtray turned into a trash can. In the distance, there were many hotel room doors. The upper right corner showed the date and time, January 15th at 1:23 a.m. The lower right corner showed a number, 18. A few seconds after the picture shows up, we see the elevator on the far left side of the screen. It's open. We can't see inside, but soon 2 people walk out and start heading down the hall away from us. Both are wearing coats. The bigger one is also wearing a hat, so he looks like a man. The second person has curly hair that goes down to her back. This is the woman from my photos. We watch them walk down the hallway. Bud, beside me, says he counted the doors between the elevator and my hotel room. He tells us they stop right in front of my room as we watch. A man in a long coat takes out a key card, opens my door, and goes inside. "Wow," I say. "That proves someone entered my room just before the pictures were taken." I turn to Bud. "You did it." But then Bill says, "Not so fast." I agree. It seems like strong evidence, but those 2 who won't believe anything since this morning won't accept it the same way. "What do you mean?" I ask. "It's clear that's the woman in the pictures, but the man could be anyone. He looked about your size. They might say this shows you were unfaithful." I realize, "Oh no, you're right." Bud laughs and says, "Hold on, cowboy. I haven't shown you everything yet. That's not the only tape I got. I recorded all of Jake's floor tapes from that night. The tape shows Jake going into his room an hour and a half earlier and not leaving until the next morning. I also reached out to some people for help after seeing this video, he continues. I got in touch with a video expert I know in Houston right away. At first, he looked at the footage a few times and said we probably wouldn't learn much about the two people because they seemed to notice the camera and turned their faces as they got close. But then he looked more closely at the old chrome ashtray in the scene. He went back to when the elevator doors were just starting to open. Then he zoomed in on a part of the frame near the ashtray. Bud then reached into his bag and pulled out another folder. This time he showed us one picture. It was a close-up shot of the chrome ashtray. You could see the open elevator doors and the two people standing there. Wow, I said. We can almost see who they are. Bud said, slow down. He then pulled out another picture and put it on his desk. Bill and I looked at it, and then at each other. Is that Schmidt? Bill asked. I looked at the photograph again. Even though the picture was a bit blurry and curved because of the shiny ashtray, we could clearly see two elevator doors that looked like brackets. In the middle of those doors were two faces. One was the woman from my pictures. The other was Thomas K. Schmidt, the vice president of sales at my company. I whistled as I listened. I'm not done yet, Bud said cheerfully. I asked the messenger boy to check the security records for your floor from tonight. It shows that someone from maintenance went into your room at 1:23 a.m. I found the guy, but he only said he lost his card that night. He didn't realize it was gone until around 4 a.m. I'm willing to bet he took the bribe. After all, that's how I got all my information. Bud raised his hand to stop me. One more thing, Jake, then I'm finished. The messenger even recognized the woman in the photos. She's a high-class escort. He gave me her name, and I managed to find her. She didn't answer many questions, but said she was paid for a joke. She was just pretending to have a good time with you. Of course, she wouldn't let me record our talk or sign anything. Bud smiled and put an audio tape on the table. But guess what? My tape recorder accidentally turned on. I messed up and recorded our conversation anyway. It can't be used as proof, but it might be helpful to one attorney. Bud tossed the last photo on the table, and we looked at my partner in bed. There she is, Jake. There's your mystery lady. I leaned back in my chair and laughed, more from relief than anything else. It was a deep laugh, one I needed for days. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 10:30 p.m. I quickly called Vicky Gambino. She didn't answer, so I left a message saying that Bill and I wanted to meet with her and Susy tomorrow. We have one last thing to show Susy. If this doesn't prove my innocence, I won't fight her divorce. Bill and Bud were quiet while I made the call. Bill put his hand on my shoulder. I smiled, and we began to talk about our plan for the next day. Bud got up and made fresh coffee. For the next hour, we talked over several ideas. Just as we were about to end our evening, my cell phone rang. It was Gambino. At the same moment, Bud's cell phone rang. I got up and stepped outside. Vicky told me she got my message and spoke to Susy. They will meet us at Susy's office tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. After hanging up, I went back to the conference room and told Bill. It's on. We quietly talked about our plan for the next day while Bud wrapped up his phone call with some grumbling. Finally, he hung up the phone and sat quietly, maybe a bit too quiet. Is something wrong, Bud? I asked, unsure. He grumbled back, I still have a few things to take care of. I'll tell you when it's the right time. Bill and I just look at each other, confused. Bud seems a bit grumpy for a man who just went through this little problem. He seems a little secretive, but maybe it's about one of the other cases at the agency. I can't think of anything that could ruin our case after what we found out today. When Bud's cases went bad, Bill and I both knew it was time to break up our little group. After we shook hands, Bill and I stepped outside, said a few last words, and went our separate ways. I went back to my hotel, opened up the minibar, and took my drink out to the balcony. I sighed deeply and started to think about the last few days. Since Friday, everything has felt like a wild ride for the first time. I'm really starting to think about what happened on Friday night. My head was all mixed up. I was so angry that night. But I can see how Schmidt planned the whole thing. Looking back, it's clear why Susy thought that way. But couldn't she have just talked to me about it, instead of embarrassing me and sending me to the hospital? Her reaction was fast and harsh, but she has always been like that. I knew it even before we got married. I'm still really angry at her for not letting me explain. And then there's the fact that she entertained that jerk right in front of me. I know how cruel she can be, the way she tricked me into the chair and then turned against me. Can we get past this? Deep down, I know I love her. That's not in doubt. Oddly, it's not even a matter of trust. It was just one act she did in anger. She was reacting to her own feelings, and when she finds out the truth, it will destroy her. I take a minute to go back to my hotel room for another beer, then head back to the balcony. I sink into a chair, sighing, realizing I want to fix all this somehow, but I'm not sure how to do it. Sipping my beer, I look out at the bright lights of Dallas. I feel like drinking more to drown my sorrows, but I know I need to have my thoughts clear for my meeting with Susy tomorrow. Halfway through my beer, my phone rings. I check it quickly and see it's Bud. He's short with me, saying I should expect a package at the front desk of my hotel by 7 in the morning. He says the package will have a few things that only Bender should see. He makes me promise to give it to Bender without looking inside any of the folders. I don't want to agree, but after a few minutes of arguing, I do. Bud doesn't say much, as usual, while I argue with him. The only thing he says is that there's a time and place for everything. Now is not the time, I grumble back, and Bud makes me promise not to peek in the folders one last time before he hangs up the phone. I think about when he was in his office and try to remember anything that might explain why he was so rude. I shake my head because Bud didn't say much of anything back then. As I call Bill to tell him about the package, a strange feeling comes over me. Bill sounds just as confused as I am. He suggests we meet at our favorite little cafe no later than 7:45 so he can see what Bud put in the package. Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. Saying I slept poorly last night is an understatement. The hardest part of the night was not looking at the package waiting for me at the hotel front desk. It had Bill's name on it. I somehow managed to keep my promise to Bud and not open it. The only reason I held back was that I had promised an old friend, Bud, and Bill had just joined me in the booth I picked in the corner. First, I laid the coffee I bought him on the table, then Bud's package. He opened the box with a frown, pulled out 2 folders, and stepped away to look through them. I reached into my jacket pocket for a voice recorder that also had Bill's name on it. I realized I had broken my promise to Bud in a way. I promised not to look in the folders, but didn't say anything about not listening to the recordings. I stared at the recorder, trying to keep my anger inside. I was angry at Susy and at that jerk Schmidt. Only the worry in my heart kept me from losing my temper. When Bill came back to our table, he asked if I was ready to go to Susy's office. I told him to wait a minute and explained what the tape was and what I heard. He put his hand on my shoulder to calm me, and we talked about what we could do with this information. The mood felt very different from last night. We grabbed our things and started walking towards my wife's office, both of us looking serious. As we entered, I could see the anticipation on both our faces. I quietly noted how their excitement turned to confusion. They looked like they were waiting for a big show, but instead, we came in like people getting ready for a funeral. Bill pulled the affidavit he got yesterday from Janine out of his briefcase. He handed a copy to Susy and Vicky. "What's this?" Susy asked. "I suggest you read it," Bill said. "It speaks for itself." "Where's the original?" Susy asked. "We have it. We plan to return it before we leave," Bill replied. Both of them quickly glanced over the document and exchanged looks. "Did you see Heidi before she signed this?" Susy asked. "Yes, I did," Bill answered for me, and I stayed quiet. I could feel my anger growing. I didn't trust myself to speak. Instead, I just agreed with Bill. "This paper speaks for itself," Susy says. "It says that when Jake is near, Heidi will sign anything." "What?" I shout. Bill squeezes my arm tightly, stopping me from saying more. "Of course, she signed it when Jake was around. She worked for you for a long time and has been close to you for even longer. You scared her into signing this new paper. Have you lost touch with how you really feel?" I respond in shock. "You seem to forget everything about Heidi and me from the last 8 years. You've been unfaithful. I don't know who you are anymore." Susy answers. "After last Friday night, I feel the same." I snap back, breaking my promise to let Bill speak. Bill tightens his grip on my arm even more. At least this time, Susy has to look away for a moment. When she meets my gaze again, her serious face is back. Bill pulls out another paper from his briefcase. "This is a copy of the first document you gave to my client," he says, handing each of them a copy. "We want to know if you see the change in the tone between the first and second pages of the affidavit that you think is correct. Did you see that the first page is a complaint about harassment? The second page seems to blame my client for bad leadership, like a job review. The two pages don't match." Vicky Gambino says, "It sounds like you both think that too." I whisper to Susy again without thinking. "Heidi told me she's never seen that first page. She said the first page was my certification. She only signed the second page and was told to initial both pages. No notary was there." "Of course she will say that, Jake. You made her do it." Susy counters, "Did anyone notice that this woman signed two different statements? Doesn't that say a lot about her?" "You know how Heidi is," I reply, challenging her. "That's what I want to see. A husband defending his lover against his wife." I look at her in surprise. "Pot calling the kettle black," I say simply, but I see a crack in Susy's confidence. She knows I'm right about Heidi. She might not trust me, but she still has faith in Heidi. "Why hasn't Heidi said anything about this before? She should have known about the papers last week," Susy argues. "Heidi's brother had a drug issue and was sent to jail. She was in Houston with her family dealing with it," I explain. "I wonder if anyone will guess who really signed this paper," Bill asks, waving his hand over the original affidavit. Neither of them falls for Bill's trick. Miss Hinkley, the head of Human Resources, went to Heidi's house to get her signature just a few hours before Heidi left for Houston. Miss Hinkley said she wanted to help with Heidi's brother's problem. She told Heidi not to worry about how long she would be in Houston. She could take as much time as she needed. Miss Hinkley also said that Jake had sent her to help Heidi and that Heidi shouldn't worry about any family leave. But Jake didn't send her. Why would the head of Human Resources go all this way for Jake's former secretary without telling him first? Why didn't she send one of the many staff members who work for her? Besides, Jake didn't even learn about Heidi's brother until yesterday. We know that Miss Hinkley is a close friend of Mr. Schmidt, who just teamed up with Susy. As soon as I mentioned Schmidt, I noticed Susy's face change. For a second, she looked frightened, but then she quickly went back to her serious prosecutor look and threw her hands up. "These arguments don't matter," she said. "The pictures show you are guilty, even if the woman in them isn't Heidi. You are clearly having a good time with someone else." "I'm not leaving Heidi, I'm leaving you," I replied. Bill squeezed my arm again, warning me to stay calm. Bill turned to Vicky and said that from the meeting yesterday, we only had two main issues that could lead to the divorce. While both points are serious on their own, together they could make a strong case. We have raised doubt about the first claim, the affidavit. We have new information that will prove that it was fake. The second issue is the photographs, and we have good reasons to doubt them too. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to take a break, think things over, and look at the facts before moving forward? "The original affidavit is not proven," Vicky Gambino said. "As far as anyone knows, these photos are of Miss Beavis. Now she's just trying to protect her boss. After blaming him, she seems to have changed her mind and doesn't want to cause trouble. No one has proved that the original document is wrong." Bill looked at me, and I shook my head slightly. I didn't want to share the tattoo details right now. It wasn't the right time. As I said, we have proof that will clear up any doubts about the original affidavit. We just need the time and a chance to show it. "I really doubt that," Vicky said, "and I'm tired of all the big talk." "Jake," said Susy, "believe me, I looked closely at the evidence. It made me feel sick. Then I brought in the experts, and they confirmed everything. The act you and your lawyer keep putting on just makes you seem more desperate and unlikable. Desperate and unlikable. Your conclusions show that you are not looking at the situation fairly. You have ignored many facts. Clearly, you've missed some important character details. After you see what we plan to show you today, I believe you will change your mind. What we share will completely change the 2 bits of proof you are using against me." I had to bite my tongue to avoid talking more about last Friday. As Bud said, now is not the time. Deep down, I wonder why I am here. Jake, this is not a game. Winning isn't everything, even if it means making things up. Suddenly, I realize I am still sitting here because I want to prove I didn't do anything wrong. Everything we show you can be easily checked, or at least it has been. In a way, you are right. This is not a game, but I need to win. You have accused me of something very serious. It's something I would never do. You have insulted my dignity and character. You have hurt me, both emotionally and physically, for something I did not do. Even if you refuse to see it, what we have done in the last few days to prove my innocence is very important to me. It's up to you to decide if it matters to you too. Thanks for that smart comment, counselor, Susy says with a bit of sarcasm. I smile at her since I know it annoys her when she tries to get under my skin, so I keep smiling to lighten the tension. Bill cuts in. Do either of you know about the hidden printer codes that the U.S. Secret Service makes printer companies put on every sheet of paper? Of course, Susy knows about it, but Vicky Gambino looks confused. I lean back and sip my coffee while Susy quickly explains things to her lawyer. So what about these hidden codes? Vicky asks. Did you know the 2 sheets that make up the supposed original document I got from you on Monday were printed at different times on the same day? Doesn't that make sense? Vicky says. The sheets would have come out of the printer at different times. Yes, they would have, Bill replies. But the second sheet was printed at 7:03 in the morning. The first sheet was made 15 hours later at 10:13 p.m. This sheet was printed after Heidi signed the document and was supposedly notarized. It was printed just a few hours after Heidi boarded a plane and was in Houston. If Heidi was in Houston, then how did her initials get on this page? I saw Susy sit up straighter and squint her eyes with doubt. Can you prove that? She asked. You can check for yourself. Your team knows more than we do. This kind of thing could have been done before. Bill Perry reached into his briefcase and shuffled through some folders until he found the right one. Here you go, he said, dropping the folder on the desk. This is the same folder and the original copy of the affidavit you gave me on Monday. Have your experts take a look. Susy picked up the folder, opened it, and began to examine what was inside. I will, she replied, showing no feeling. But let's say they were printed at different times. That doesn't prove bad intent, as you claim. Maybe there was a mistake, and they just reprinted the first page. Bill spoke quickly. Miss Gambino, I'm sure you know that would not happen with a document that was supposed to be notarized. More importantly, if they really did reprint the first page, how do you explain Heidi's initials on it? Remember, Heidi was in Houston when that page was printed. Also, Heidi's initials on the first page were not written in ink, but printed using toner, the same toner from the first page. This supports Heidi's recent statement that she never saw that page or put her initials on it. I think we have clearly shown that at least the first page of the affidavit you sent is a fake. Not only was it not signed by Heidi Beavis, but she never even saw that page until Jake showed it to her this week, Bill added without admitting anything. The looks on Susy and Gambino's faces told me they realized the affidavit was fake. I hope you understand, Bill continued. The fact that the affidavit was forged also shows bad intent. I hope you're not saying my client forged the affidavit or did anything with bad intent, Vicky interrupted. It seems pretty clear to me that your client has done some pretty bad things. I burst out, but Bill's hand stopped me from speaking again. We are not saying your client had anything to do with this forgery. We even know who did it. It's too bad your client didn't do her homework to find this out. It only took us a few hours with far fewer resources once we had the document. But we suspected from the start that it was fake, and your client did not. Bill raised his hand to silence Gambino's complaints. We want to keep moving and share more information. Bill dug into his briefcase again and pulled out another folder. He opened it and showed 2 copies of the log from that day. The first affidavit was typed. We've already talked about some key details, like when access to the floor happened and whose badges they belonged to. Bill explains the documents and points out that the second sheet was printed at 7:03 a.m. The badge log shows there were only 2 people on the floor. Bill stops for a moment, letting both women figure out that those 2 people were Hinkley and Schmidt. He then says, I know who gave you that affidavit, Susy. I also know you realize we have been in a fight for years. You knew he didn't like me for a long time, and you should have thought about that. He set me up, and you helped him. I look at Susy, and this time she can't meet my gaze and looks away. Bill continues. Now, we have the most important proof about the pictures. Yesterday, we talked about the short time when the pictures were taken. We went over the fact that my client didn't move during that time. Susy asks directly, So you admit you were in that photo? I sadly reply, yes. Susy presses on. So even if it's not Heidi, you still cheated with a woman who looks like her. You might have even thought it was Heidi. I respond quickly. Do you think so little of me that you have to make up lies about me? I take a breath and say, yes, that's me in that picture. But no, that's not Heidi. If you look closely at the last photo, you can see a tattoo on her back. Heidi doesn't have any tattoos. I'm sure it's not her. Susy fires back. Jake, the issue isn't about Heidi. It's about you. She's clearly annoyed. Bill says, I want a chance to explain our evidence without being interrupted. Susy looks at Gambino, then back at me. She simply says, no. Bill says, fine. This will slow us down, but it won't change anything. First, Jake didn't move in the pictures because he was on drugs. What? How do you know that? Why didn't you tell me about it on Monday? Susy asks. Bill says, I'll get back to that later. Right now, let's move on. Those pictures were staged. We already agreed about the clock and calendar. No, we didn't agree. You talked, and we said no, Susy replies again. Nothing was agreed. First, do you think my client is foolish enough to let someone take his photo while he is cheating? And second, we've already shown that one of your key questions was messed with. We know a lot of work went into creating a fake affidavit. Don't you think this makes the photos suspicious? The people who made the affidavit wouldn't go as far as to stage those photos, would they? I really want to say how foolish your client seems. There could be many reasons why the clock and calendar are set up like this. Bill asks about the water bottle. What about the water bottle? I reply. You don't mean the hotel doesn't have water, do you? This hotel only sells mountain ice water. They don't offer any other kind. You can't find it in vending machines, dining rooms, or room service. If you look closely, this water bottle is from Aquafina. It doesn't belong to the hotel. You could have brought that water bottle yourself. Yes, he did. Mr. Schmidt gave it to him. How convenient, Susy shot back. Is he the reason you cheated? No, it's not all his fault. You share some of the blame too, I hissed. And I didn't cheat. Bill just stared at me and I sank back into the chair, feeling hot. There's a witness. Mr. Weston was with Jake and Mr. Schmidt. We haven't asked him yet, but we think he can confirm that Schmidt came back with the last drinks and a bottle of water for Jake. This was about 15 minutes before Jake felt sleepy. He said goodnight to Weston and Schmidt and went to his room alone. I smiled as Susy looked at her hands. She does this when she's worried or losing control of a situation. Did you see one of those flip calendars in the hotel? Bill asked. Susy looked up. I'm not the right person to answer questions. So you didn't see a calendar there? Or did you? No, she said firmly. Would you like to know who has one on his desk? I added, not really knowing if Schmidt had one, but thinking it could be a good guess. Susy didn't say anything, looking down at her hands again. We can prove there was another person in the room. Do you have proof? Vicky asked. First, we know the camera was moved. The clock and calendar were changed to set the time for the person taking the pictures. So why would you think my client would let someone take pictures of him while cheating? Or maybe he was set up. As we showed before, how do you know the camera wasn't on a tripod? It looks like it's at the same angle, Vicky said. Now Susy was quiet and still looking at her hands. Bill explained that there's a zoom on the pictures, plus the angle of the clock and calendar. He then opened his briefcase and took out a folder of pictures, putting it on the table next to the others. He suggested they get their own experts to look at it closely, just like we have. I glance back at Susy. Her hands are tight in fists, and her eyes are locked on something. I can't tell if she's really listening anymore. Jake, you said you have proof that someone drugged you, Susy suddenly says, jumping back into the talk. Bill jumps in too. Do you have clear evidence? He asks. No, I say, just a lot of hints that something's wrong. We don't have the water bottle to check, and it's too late to check my blood. But how do you think these photos were taken? Susy asks. Did you see that there's no sign that Jake did anything to that woman in the photos? She stands up, confused. Look for yourself, Susy, I say. This time, look with clear eyes. Don't let what you wished I was cloud your view. Would it matter if you found out that I woke up the next morning just in my underwear? Susy looks at me, then at the photos. She shakes her head and sits down again. Jake, everything you're saying sounds like you're trying to play the victim. Why would anyone go this far? Susy, you already know why, I reply. He went as far as making fake papers. I've told you this for months. He did this for a few reasons. They aren't crazy if you think about it. We both wanted the same deal, a really good one. One of us had to win. There's a man behind all this, and you know it just like you know me. Plus, we just don't like each other. His feelings are worse than that. Nothing would make him happier than to make my life hard and then show me what he did. But he needed someone close to me to make it hurt. I can see all the color leaving Susy's face. She realizes how badly she has been tricked. I wonder if she understands that, even if she didn't stab me in the back, she helped twist the knife. Vicky asks if we have proof about being set up from the photos. Bill pulls out a VHS tape that Bud made from different parts of the hotel's security cameras. After asking, he walks over to the side of Susy's office and turns on the TV, putting in the tape. He takes the remote and comes back to us. This is the footage from the security camera outside Jake's hotel room the night those pictures were taken. He presses fast forward until it shows 1:23 a.m., then he rewinds it back a minute and decides to let the tape do the talking. A few seconds later, we see the elevator doors open. Two people step out and walk down the hall, then use a key card to enter a room. He fast forwards again until it says 1:35 a.m. A little later, the same two men walk out of the room. They turn away from the camera and walk down the hall. They open a door marked stairwell and disappear. He turns the tape over and plays it again. This was Jake's room they went into, Bill says quietly. It was the same night as the photos. They were in his room for only 12 minutes. This was the time when the pictures were taken. If you want, I can play the tape again. You'll see that they know about the camera and try hard to keep their faces out of its view. Do you want me to play the tape again? Vicky looks at Susy, who is holding her hand tighter. Susy looks a bit pale. Vicky looks at me and shakes her head. Bill says, "We have one more thing to show you." He reaches down and takes out another folder. "These are your copies," Bill says, holding out a folder with two sets of pictures. Then he changes the tape to 1:23 a.m. when the elevator doors first open. "Do you see the chrome trash can in the lower right corner?" he asks. They don't answer. "This is important." Bill says it firmly, almost like an order. Susy looks and stops fidgeting. "Yes, I see," she says, sounding disappointed. "Look at the first picture. It's a snapshot taken from the tape." Bill throws the photo on the table. It shows pretty much the same thing they see on TV. "Now look at the second picture. This is a larger view of the lower right corner of the first picture," Bill adds as I place another picture down. The top part of the chrome ashtray is clearly visible in this photo. Now look at the third picture, which is an even bigger view of the second picture. The outline of the trash can is gone, but you can still see the images. "One last thing. This is a larger view of the third photo," Bill says. I look again at the photograph in front of Susy. It shows two men in long coats. The smaller one on the right has curly hair. The taller one on the left looks familiar. The image isn't very clear, but I recognize him. "It's not clear enough," Vicky says. "It might be hard to show in court, but I don't think that's needed. We all know who it is." Susy looks down at her hands. She seems to be shutting down. I say, "Susy, we even found the woman in the photos. She won't sign the paper, but she will come here. She says Schmidt is the man who paid her. She thought it was just a trick. She will also say I looked drunk because I wasn't moving." I can hear Susy crying. Part of me remembers the good times we shared and wants to comfort her. But another part remembers what she did recently and wants her to feel my pain. I know now that Susy was right. I lied to myself about winning at any cost. But so far I feel like I'm still losing. We're both going to lose. Vicky puts her hand on my shoulder and looks at me. She tells me that her client needs some time and that he will get back to us. This annoys me. After everything I've gone through, I wish she would just ask me to forgive her. I'm about to say something when I feel Bill's hand on my arm. I look at Susy, then back at Vicky. Vicky says the word, "please." I nod. Bill and I stand up and turn to leave. I pause and look around. "Susy," I say. She looks up at me, her eyes filled with tears. My heart feels heavy and I wonder if I should say something else. I wave my hand and turn away without saying more. The door clicks shut behind me. On Wednesday at 1 p.m. Bill and I walk into the same conference room where I met with the committee on Monday. The same 5 people are there. I smile at Tom and Christy as I sit down and make space for Bill. Before the meeting, I had a chance to talk to Tom Weston. He told me he had mentioned Heidi's issue in his talk with Hinkley. Heidi definitely had a problem at work, and since Hinkley was the human resources director, that was his area. Tom was surprised when I mentioned Hinkley's personal involvement, but I only shared a few details. Tom could also confirm something else. He remembered that Schmidt bought the last drinks for 2 reasons. First, because he had waited too long, and second, he noticed that the water bottle on the tray had no cap. Christy clears her throat to start the meeting. "Excuse me?" she says. She stands up and reaches across the table. "I don't think we've met," she tells Bill. "You must be Christy Evans. Mr. Vickers has told me a lot about you." "I'm Bill Benner. Mr. Vickers has hired me as his lawyer." "I see," she says seriously. "Mr. Vickers, you know you can't have outside representation." "I know I'm entitled to representation," I reply. "Yes, but only internal representation. This is not a court of law. We have to follow HR policy, which doesn't allow outside help," she explains. "I don't believe I can get fair internal representation, so I need outside representation. If you think otherwise, I see no point in continuing this meeting." I stand up, and Bill quickly follows. Christy looks first at Tom, who nods, then at Hinkley, who shrugs. "Mr. Vickers," Christy says flatly, "I have been appointed special counsel in this matter, and the partners have assigned me to handle it. Last night, an emergency meeting was held with all the firm's partners and members of this committee. After a lot of talking, the choice was made to let you go from this company. The severance package we sent you on Monday is still available, but you need to sign it right now. You will also need to sign a paper saying you won't sue the company for anything else." I slowly sit back down. "Did they decide this last night?" I ask, feeling uneasy. Nobody answers. I look at Tom Weston sitting next to me. He looks upset. I can see he isn't happy about what's happening. I then turn to Christy. There is a little mist in her eyes, and she is trying hard to stay calm. Today isn't going how I expected at all. I feel empty inside. It's like I lost something important. I have worked hard for this company for years, and now I have to leave because of some false claims. My eyes move to Schmidt on my right. He has a smug smile on his face that annoys me, or maybe it just makes my anger burn more. I look at Christy again. It was decided on Monday that I had until noon today to give my answer to this group about the accusations against me. "The offer was made nicely and is not required," Christy says quietly. "Not required," Bill chimes in. "Mr. Benner," Christy replies quickly, "you cannot speak at this meeting. If you continue, I will have to ask you to leave the building." "Shut up!" Bill suddenly yells, surprising everyone, even me. Wow! Now I remember why I didn't want to work in corporate law. Mr. Benner cuts in. "Christy, you will listen to me now." Bill cuts him off, saying, "Or you'll be hearing from me in court and it won't be good for you." Without waiting, Bill starts to explain all the charges and proof we found over the last 2 days. I enjoy watching this play out. I especially like seeing Hinkley. She changes color from pale to bright red when her connection to the scam comes out. She blushes deeply when Bill describes how she used the info Tom gave her to get Heidi to sign the first document. But the best part is when he talks about the hidden codes and badge info. Bill also points out that their meeting last night broke the rules about my firing. He makes it clear that my firing is not just from false claims, but that the higher-ups broke the law by making fake papers and used company tools to commit the crimes. So, Bill dismisses their offer. "Your first proposal is not acceptable," he says. "By the rules we discussed yesterday, we will have to take back our severance offer." "Fine," Christy says back. "Your team has done my client a good service by taking back the offer. This gives my client a chance to take legal action for being fired unfairly. He could also press charges against the company and some of its leaders. Despite this, my client has spent a lot of his life with this company and still feels some loyalty toward it. He is open to a new offer that is at least 2.5 times bigger than the severance pay you took away. In return, my client will not file a lawsuit, which he would likely win. My client will also keep quiet about any illegal actions from the company. He will sign an agreement promising not to talk about his time there or compete with the company. However, he still has the right to sue individuals for anything wrong they did to him outside of work." Bill was talking for a long time, over 15 minutes. When he suddenly stops, it leaves a gap in the conversation. Christy clears her throat. I need to share this with all the partners. I'll give you until the end of tomorrow to respond. It will take me a few days to get them ready. She protests softly. You've had 2 urgent meetings in 2 days. I'm sure you can have another meeting in the next day and a half. I'll prepare our court papers for tomorrow. Bill responds firmly. If I don't hear back from you by the end of business tomorrow, we will file our case in civil court on Friday. How can I reach you? Christy asks. Bill hands her a business card across the table. Christy takes the card and glances at Hinkley and Schmidt sitting next to Bill. I'll need both of you in my office right after this meeting. I'll start with you, Miss Hinkley. Hinkley replies, I have a few meetings today, but I can meet this afternoon. Schmidt looks nervous and shifts in his chair. No, Christy says. You can come with me to my office now if you need to cancel anything. My assistant can help you. Christy looks to her right. Tom, could you please walk Mr. Vickers and Mr. Benner out? Tom agrees, and everyone begins to leave. Tom laughs and tells me the other partners will likely agree to the new deal when they see what is happening. We share kind words from our years working together. He wants me to keep in touch and not be a stranger. Finally, he tells me he won't see me to the door, as I know where it is. He isn't worried about me taking any supplies. We shake hands, and I watch him hurry down the hallway, not to his office, but toward Christy's office. Bill and I chuckle as we walk out. As we pass the quiet conference room, I hear someone joke behind us. So do you think you're a jerk? I turn around and see Schmidt leaning against the doorframe. Aren't you supposed to be in Christy's office taking your meds right now? I ask. Forget that, he laughs. They're going to fire you. That fake evidence you made was bad enough. So what? I say. I can find better jobs at other companies. Schmidt laughs and walks into the conference room. I quickly follow, but Bill grabs my arm. You don't want to do this, Jake, he warns me. I have to, I reply, and I step into the conference room, closing the door behind me. I walk straight up to Schmidt. He's a bit taller than me, but that doesn't scare me. You're never going to get that partnership, jerk. You'll be lucky to avoid jail. Suddenly, I feel a sharp pain in my face. I didn't see his arm coming towards my nose. I get stunned and hear him laugh. You were always a lousy lawyer, he mocks. I try to shake off the dizziness and focus. I'll make sure to ruin you, I mumble. Schmidt chuckles. See, Vickers? You're proving me right by talking about partnerships and proof. Do you think it's all about partnership? Of course it is, I mutter. It's what you've always wanted. It's also how to put me down. He laughs again. You're still proving me right. This isn't really about a job. It's about your wife. She wouldn't have noticed me in college, but now she sure cares. He laughs again. You scumbag! I seethe as my vision starts to return. You're just a coward, he growls. You don't get it, do you? You've lost, idiot. My vision clears, and I feel a rush of anger. I jump up from my seat, towering over him. I throw my head back, and it hits his nose. While leaning back, I throw a couple of punches. You're just entertaining my life, I say. Bill looks at me, raising an eyebrow. You're making your lawyer's life interesting, he comments. Are you okay? I've had better days, I admit, but I'm not too bad, actually. He smiles. Let's get out of here. One thing first, I say as he groans. Seriously, I have to do this. Please follow me. I walk a short way to the marketing area and head to Schmidt's office. I feel a mix of emotions as I approach his assistant. She looks surprised and worried when I reach her desk. Betty, I start. I don't want to cause you any trouble. I just need to ask one thing. Was my wife here yesterday? She looks at me and sighs. I close my eyes, feeling pain as she nods. Did she go into Schmidt's office? I ask. She nods again, and I ask if the door was locked. She nods once more. Thank you, Betty. I appreciate your honesty. I glance at Bill. Come on, Bill, I say softly. There's only one way to deal with this now. It's Thursday, 11 o'clock a.m. As Bill and I sit down, it's clear that yesterday's meeting was tough. There are only 4 of us here today. Bill is my representative, and Tom Weston and Christy Evans are here from my old company. I ask, where are the others? The Personnel Review Committee is gone because Jake already settled your job situation, Christy replies, sounding much more casual than she did yesterday. We're just talking about your severance package. I nod, sensing that Christy's smile hides more than she says. After meeting with all the partners, Jake accepted your terms except for the money, Christy continues. They decided to raise it to $3 million. I raise my eyebrows in surprise and glance at Bill. That's only a 50% increase. Bill frowns. That's much less than the $5 million we want. Christy looks at Bill. That's our offer, she says simply. Bill and I exchange looks. We both shrug as he pulls a folder from his briefcase and hands it to Christy. We watch as she opens it. Her surprise is clear. What's this? You're suing for $10 million? That's double what you asked for yesterday. As I said before, we can't change our position, Bill says. You have executives who faked documents, worked when they shouldn't have, and used company resources. The way they handled firing my colleague was a conspiracy with top people in this company. And if that wasn't enough, my client was attacked in this building by one of your senior executives, Bill adds. I'm aware of the fight, Mr. Benner, Christy replies, taking on a serious tone. It depends on how you see it as to who attacked whom. I notice a small smile forming at the corner of her lips as she looks at my black eyes left from Schmidt hitting me. My client was just defending himself. He had to do it from his knees after your vice president of marketing, Mr. Schmidt, hit him, Bill explains. Mr. Schmidt was acting on his own. He's not with this company anymore, Christy says. Oh, Bill responds. So you don't include former employees in personnel reviews, but Mr. Schmidt was still employed when we met yesterday. Since Mr. Schmidt attacked my client right after the meeting, I believe he was still on the payroll then. There's still the question of who attacked whom, Christy argues. I saw Mr. Schmidt's attack myself, Bill insists. All right, Christy says. I expect you to just help your client. Christy says, I hope you're not saying I encouraged someone to lie in court. Besides, there is a second witness. She looks surprised. Brad stands up and opens the door. Betty Higgins, who helps Mr. Schmidt and whom I talked to yesterday, walks in looking nervous. Bill pulls out a chair for her and she sits down with thanks. Mrs. Higgins, Bill says to her, I want to make it clear that you do not have to swear an oath. I have a few questions and I would really like honest answers. Betty nods. Were you standing next to me yesterday at the entrance to conference room 15? Yes, she replies. Did you see the fight between Jake, Mr. Vickers, and your old boss? Mr. Schmidt continues. Bill. Betty looks unsure as she glances at Tom and then Christy. Mrs. Higgins, I would really appreciate it if you could share what you remember. Nothing bad will happen if you tell the truth, Christy adds. Betty takes a deep breath and looks back at Bill. Yes, I saw that. Can you explain what you saw? Betty looks first at me, then at Christy, and finally back at Bill. I try to hide a smile because I can tell Bill has made her uncomfortable. I've never seen her want to help anyone before. Maybe I think this way because I know she feels weak around him. They, Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Vickers, started to argue, and then Mr. Schmidt just punched Mr. Vickers in the face, says Betty. Can you show me how? Interrupts Bill. Well, he used his arm like this. She pulls back her hand and pretends to hit Bill on the nose. Thanks, Betty, Bill says. And then what happened? Mr. Vickers fell down, but not all the way to the floor, just to his knees. I could see he was confused. Then Mr. Schmidt started to say mean things about Mr. Vickers' wife, she adds. There were some bad words, but that was mostly what Mr. Schmidt said. And then what happened? Bill asks. Then Mr. Vickers somehow managed to hit him in the face with the back of his head. I couldn't see it because he was still on one knee. Mr. Schmidt was standing over him and making fun of Mrs. Vickers. He kept threatening Mr. Vickers and swearing. That's when Mr. Vickers hit him. I heard Mr. Vickers say something and then he turned to leave. I then turned around and went back to my desk. I wanted nothing to do with what happened in the room. Thank you, Betty, Bill said kindly. When you went back to your desk, Mr. Vickers and I came in just a few minutes later. Betty nods. Yes, you two came in shortly after I sat down. Did he ask you about his wife coming into Mr. Schmidt's office around noon on Tuesday? Yes, he did, she answered. I was about to stop my attorney from asking more questions, but then he told Betty that he was done asking her anything. Bill turned to Christy and asked if she wanted to ask Betty anything. Christy looked at Tom, then at Bill, and shook her head. She thanked Betty and said she could return to her work. Then my lawyer surprised me by explaining what happened at my house on Friday night and that I had to go to the hospital over the weekend. Christy and Tom looked shocked, but Christy quickly collected herself, being the attorney she is, and said what happened at my home was not important. It was a private matter and had nothing to do with the company. Bill said that Mr. Schmidt and Mr. Hinkley had planned against me. He claimed they used company resources to try to make me look bad and even broke the law to help get me fired. He added that Mr. Schmidt had admitted to doing all this, using company tools to try to take control of Mr. Wicker's wife. So what happened on Friday night, even though it was at my home, was just part of the wrongdoings happening at this company. Bill then said he believed any judge would see it that way and let the jury hear everything. Finally, Bill asked Christy how she thought things would look to the public. Christy looked at Tom and asked if she and Mr. Weston could take a 10-minute break. Once we were in the hallway, Bill asked, "Do you think they will agree?" Brad replied, "I don't see any other choice. They know if this goes to court, the papers will tear them apart. That's not the kind of attention they want. But I don't think they will pay the full $10 million. After about 15 minutes, they both returned, looking serious. Christy looked at me and said, "Jake, I can offer you a maximum of $6 million. That's the most they will agree to. They also want you to sign an agreement to keep this private forever and a 2-year agreement to not compete with them." "Just like you offered," I replied, looking at Bill and smiling. We really only needed $5 million, and I didn't mind the non-compete part. I nodded at Christy, smiling back and reaching across the table to agree. After a brief talk between Christy and Bill to finalize the details, Bill and I left the conference room and walked to the elevators. "Mr. Vickers?" I heard someone call from behind. Bill and I turned around and saw Betty Higgins looking nervous and rubbing her hands together. "Betty, is something wrong?" I asked. "Well," she said, "yes and no. What is it, Betty? Is it about yesterday, when you asked me about Mrs. Vickers going into Mr. Schmidt's office?" My angry look made her step back. Bill took a small step towards her and said, "Go on, Mrs. Higgins." "What did you want to say?" Betty asked, unsure of how to continue. "I wasn't shocked that you asked me those questions, Mr. Vickers, but I was surprised by one question you didn't ask." I looked at her confused. "You didn't ask how long Mrs. Vickers was in his office yesterday. She locked the door like I said, but she was only in there for a minute, maybe 2, no more. When she came out, she looked very angry." I glanced at Bill and saw that he was looking back at me. "Thank you for telling me that, Betty. I'm sorry if I scared you," I told her. "Is there anything else you want to share?" "No, Mr. Vickers. Well, yes. I'm sorry all this happened to you." "Thanks, Betty. I appreciate that," I said as I watched her turn and walk away. Bill then asked, "So what? Yesterday, when you found out she went into his office, I saw you finally give up. I thought your heart had turned against her. Now it looks like nothing happened in that office yesterday. Does that change anything?" I stared at Bill for a long time and then replied, "Not a damn thing, Bill. When I heard those tapes from Tuesday, it was over for me. I just didn't realize it yet." At that moment, the elevator bell rang and the door opened. Bill and I stepped inside as I watched the doors close on yet another part of my life for the last time. On Thursday at 4:30 p.m., Bill and I were taken into my wife's office again, this time because they asked us to come. Honestly, we would have asked for another meeting anyway. It was time to end this once and for all. I noticed right away that Susy looked much better than the day before, but she still had trouble meeting my eyes. Once we sat down, Vicky said, "Jake, Susy has withdrawn her petition for divorce." She stopped talking when Susy reached for her hand. "Jake?" Susy said quietly, lifting her gaze to me. "We have a lot to talk about. I need to tell you something hard. I've made some serious mistakes in this whole thing. I want to apologize to you. No, I need you to come home." I let out a deep sigh. There was no easy way to say this to Susy. "I can't do this anymore. I doubt I'll ever be able to forgive you, and I can't come home." Vicky looked shocked, but it seemed like Susy had been expecting my answer. "We filed for divorce," Bill said during a pause, handing them copies of the paperwork and the proposed settlement. The settlement was clear. "All the things we brought into the marriage will stay with us. Anything we got during the marriage will be split evenly. No big payments and no alimony. We know that under Texas law, Mrs. Vickers is entitled to half of everything, but we believe there are special reasons for a different kind of settlement. Neither side wanted the events of the past week to be revealed in court. "Jake, what happened?" Vicky asked, shocked. Susy put her hand on Vicky's arm to quiet her. I noticed that Susy still hadn't told her lawyer about everything that happened with Schmidt. "I've had enough, Vicky," I said sharply. "Clearly your client hasn't told you what she did, so let me give you a quick summary." I turned to Susy, who lowered her head and stared at her hands. "When I came home last Friday after being away for almost 2 weeks and just before our anniversary, my wife lured me into a chair, making it so I couldn't move, and then she cheated on me right in front of me." Vicky looked at me, then at her client, then back at me, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. "I woke up alone in the hospital over the weekend." "Oh my God!" Susy gasped, looking horrified. I ignored her and focused on the lawyer. "When I got out of the hospital, my wife had a restraining order put on our house. I found out that all our money had been taken from our accounts, and all my credit cards were reported as stolen. The next day, I received divorce papers and was told my job wanted to fire me. Over the next 2 days, I gathered enough proof to disprove all the fake evidence against me. As bad as this week has been, I would have still tried to save my marriage if things hadn't gone so wrong. Sadly, they did. All 4 of us met on Tuesday, and in just 24 hours, we showed enough proof to make people doubt the sworn statements and the photos. I know neither of you can admit this, but deep down, you both have doubts. Even with those doubts, I learned that my wife left this office on Tuesday night. She met my rival and had fun with him in my bed, just like she had been doing for days. I found out about this on Tuesday night. Every morning this week, while I tried to convince my wife that the allegations were false, she just laughed at me. I glanced at Bill and nodded. Bill opened his briefcase and pulled out a cassette tape. "This is a copy of a phone call from Schmidt in my bedroom Tuesday night. You two can listen to it whenever you like, but it mainly says that Schmidt is planning a party for you this weekend. Of course, if you still want to go, you could call him," I said, looking at Susy. Tears streamed down her face for the first time I'd seen. Her tears meant nothing to me. I sighed. I had done enough for one day. Bill and I should have left, but I felt I had to say more. "I need to tell you 2 things, Susy. First, you need to take the test. Second, I will always love you. I can't be with you anymore. I don't know who you are now. I can't believe you thought I was being unfaithful to you. I can't believe you hurt me like this. I don't understand how you changed. How could you keep seeing Schmidt even when you doubted my loyalty? Is there so much anger in you?" A few nights ago, I was alone in my hotel room. I thought about all the questions I had. I still have many questions, but I don't really want to know the answers anymore. I think I finally get that saying about revenge. It says to dig 2 graves before seeking revenge. Susy, you've buried us both. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.